The first time I actually shot at somebody, I had the crosshairs on. I was looking through the sights, and we had them, and I zoomed in and pulled the trigger on the cannon, and it goes, BOP!
651 radio check.
He actually hit one of them with a rocket, which is pretty incredible considering it's unguided. He was shooting an AH warhead, like hit this dude running.
Wow. Did you get to observe that as it happened? Just dissipated?
No, actually, it wasn't a direct hit. It wounded him, and he was kind of flopping around, and he was going to shoot him again. I go, man, he's done.
Don't waste it.
Yeah. Like I said, I wanted to be in the Air Force. I had the grandiose idea that I was going to be a aeronautical engineer and be a fighter pilot in the Air Force. You know, I think a lot of people think it's you got to be smart, and I don't think that's the case, because, you know, I think people of all levels of intelligence can learn how to fly.
So in this actual rocket tube here, we can take up to 19 rockets. However, we can put up to 4 of them on the aircraft. That'd give us a total of 76 rockets.
A Hellfire for sure is fucking everybody in this room up, right?
If it came in through the roof of this room, it'd probably wound everybody in the room.
Machine gun-wise, what caliber is it?
It's a 30 millimeter cannon.
Engage.
And how many rounds?
We would set bursts in the cockpit. So normally it'd be either a 10 round or a 20 round burst. You know, if you did what you were doing the way you were supposed to do it, it usually only took a couple of bursts to take care of business.
Yeah. Do you remember your first real world engagement on that deployment?
I remember more vividly the first time I got shot at, which to me was like the most surreal experience I've ever had in my life. It was like I was watching a movie or something. The one I remember the most was the shoot down on the 28th of January. Those guys on the ground called for air support. So as soon as we turned inbound, my front seater goes, oh my God, you know, he's like, oh. They started taking fire from almost like 360. There were like a lot more bad guys there than they saw initially. And that aircraft just got blown out of the sky.
Obviously, neither of them survived.
No, yeah, they were gone. They had a hard time figuring out exactly what shot it down because there were so many bullet holes and stuff in the aircraft. The bad guys were lined up on this berm, pretty much roll in and start shooting. He got the rounds onto them, but then they scattered and they all jumped in this trench. And when they were in the trench line, that's when I fired the flechettes.
Do you guys know what the after action, like how many of them you guys ended up smoking?
No idea.
A bunch.
I would assume so.
Yeah.
I was told that the Flechette-Rounds were effective.
Yeah.
You're not going to shoot at us and get away with it.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He was an Army AH-64 Delta Helo pilot in command and Air Commission Commander. 3 combat tours in Iraq, logging more than 1,000 hours of combat flight time. The author of Crazyhorse, flying Apache Attack Helicopters with the 1st Cavalry Division in Iraq. Producer of First Attack and The Longest Month documentaries, and he's the owner of Danger Pig Military Aviation Media. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Dan McClinton.
Hi.
Thank you for coming, and especially on such short notice. I saw, I think it was a post on X, Twitter, I don't know, everybody still calls it Twitter, but kind of venting your frustrations about writing the book and trying to get a story out and you know, not having the traction that you were hoping, and it seemed like that kind of opened the floodgates a little bit with you know, requests for interviews and just, me being lucky enough to have you live locally, managing to get you on so quick.
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. So I'm really looking forward to it. I know, for me personally, having been in Iraq and knowing, just having you guys do what you did, as good as special operations is, without you guys, like, it would be a very different story on the ground. I mean, the amount of times that pilots that do the things that you and your command did, have saved our lives over and over and over, and I think that to your point of getting your story out and making sure people are aware of that, I think far too few people realize how valuable and important you guys in the sky are.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's the whole reason I wrote the book, is because I wanted to tell the stories, not my story, but the stories that I knew about. And actually, because this book covers our 15-month deployment during OIF 0608, so 2007, 2006 time frame.
Which is easily argued, or it's easy to argue that that was the hottest time in that country by quite a bit. That 06, 07 time frame, especially in the Triangle, and really the entire country. But that was the height of the war, in my opinion. What's the last full book that you've read?
I think the last book that I read all the way through is a book called Race of Aces. And it's a book about P-38 pilots in the Pacific during World War II. And it covers Richard Bong and a guy named McGuire, who was like the second, he scored the second most kills.
Oh, wow.
And Bong was like America's first
fighter pilot,
like the greatest days.
Oh, wow.
So it's a pretty interesting book. Anybody who likes, that sort of thing, I would recommend it to them.
Yeah, cool. Was there a singular takeaway from it?
To me, like when I read it, I didn't realize how hard they had it, because everybody thinks, pilots, they just come back, go to the airstrip and hang out, drink beer or whatever.
Yeah.
The airstrips that they were working out of were primitive, and sometimes the guys that worked on the airplanes had to fight off Japanese, while they're flying. And because they started out, the book starts out in Guadalcanal, and it progresses throughout the war. But that was the surprising thing to me to read about the book, is like how hard it was.
Yeah, it's amazing contrast to present day where, where planes are taking off from, whether it's a carrier or any airfield in whatever forward operating base, it's usually pretty safe, and that's kind of the home base, of TAG, if you will. But if time travel were possible, where would you go and when?
Because I really love aviation. I probably wouldn't go back that far in time. I'd probably want to go back to like just after World War II, when all the leap forwards in technology was taking place. Like, from when they started making supersonic fighters and the SR-71 and the X-15 and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That was like right before I was born, or I was too little to see.
Yeah.
To me, that stuff is so fascinating, and as you kind of touched on, I'm into photography. So if I could take my camera equipment back with me to that time, that would be the most awesome thing.
Yeah, getting into the Chuck Yeager era, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite quote?
When I retired, they asked us for a quote, and I used that Bible quote that said, the Lord said, "Who will go for us?" And I said, I think it's, "I am here, send me."
Yeah.
That's the quote I used, and I'm paraphrasing here because I didn't get it exactly correct. But, there's a Neil Peart lyric that I really like, and it says, "We're only immortal for a limited time."
Yeah. That's awesome. I like that. Be a good T-shirt or a bumper sticker. Maybe even a tattoo across the chest. Who knows? Hey guys, I wanted to take a minute to tell you about the Mic Drop Patreon, where you can get the real mic drop experience the way it's meant to be seen. You get completely uncensored, unfiltered, and uncut episodes with nothing held back, just raw, real conversations directly from me to you, without YouTube censorship. Plus, you'll see it days before anyone else, with early premieres and exclusive bonus content that you won't find anywhere else. You get behind-the-scenes access to the show, including pre- and post-show footage with me and the guest both in studio and on location, depending on what the guest is into and what we have going on. On top of that, we've got tons of Patreon-only perks, mic drop swag, access to exclusive merch, and the chance to submit your questions to be asked at the end of every episode. You'll also get a sneak peek at our upcoming guests, so you'll know who's in the studio weeks before anyone else. We're constantly releasing new features and dropping new content based on what you want to see. For our top tier members, you get the same mic drop challenge coin that all of my guests receive from the upcoming show, which will never ever be for sale. We've got quarterly merch that's sent out directly to you, a monthly Zoom call with me where we talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, and an active group chat where we all shoot the shit on a daily basis. All of that for just a few bucks a month to support the show. Right now, we're also offering a 10% discount off an annual subscription, which means that you get more than a free month. I want to say thank you to everyone who has already signed up. Your support means that we get to keep bringing you the content that you love. So if you haven't yet, hit the link in the description or go to patreon.com/micdrop and join the team. I'll see you guys in there. Thank you.
Team Dog, premium meals designed to keep your dog healthy, happy, and strong, to improve digestion, boost energy, and support a shiny coat. Non-GMO ingredients, no fillers, no gluten, no corn, no seed oils, and no soy. Just pure, high-quality ingredients to fuel your dog's best life. It was crafted by experts, made for your dog, Navy SEAL K9 trainer, and nutritionists. Team Dog Food, where no piece goes to waste.
Do you, Texas being the state that it is and being a combat veteran, do you carry an EDC normally?
I did for a while, and actually when I retired from the Army, I got certified as a concealed carry instructor.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. And actually what I saw at that course actually made me not want to do it so much.
Really? Carrying itself or teaching it?
Teaching.
Yeah, I understand that for sure. It's probably frightening.
Well, some of the people I saw, there was a lady standing next to me, like when we were doing qualification.
Yeah.
And you know how short that distance is. And it's like she wasn't hitting. I thought I was going to get hit by a ricochet from something that she was shooting.
Yeah.
And the instructor wouldn't stop it, or wouldn't put, I felt like, ideally I probably should have stood up and said, okay, this needs to stop, call a ceasefire. Because I felt that she wasn't, safe.
Yeah.
But I just don't. Well, I try to control the places I go to. That I don't. Where I don't feel like I'm not safe.
Yeah.
And like these days, that gets fewer and fewer places. But
so you're not going to the Texas State Fair, probably.
No.
So in essence, then you don't normally carry a gun?
Not normally.
Not normally. You brought up an interesting point. Concealed weapons wise, like as somebody who's been an instructor and you've spent decades handling firearms, and you could argue you flew a firearm in many ways. Where do you personally draw the line from a Constitution standpoint, Second Amendment standpoint, but also kind of reconciling or leveraging public safety with who can carry and how and what level of training there needs to be? Where do you kind of draw that line?
I'm okay with the laws the way Texas has them. I just wish, I don't know how you compel somebody to, because I think there's people out there that are able to carry that probably shouldn't, because they're not trained well enough. If they started putting rounds downrange under pressure, it would probably be more of a danger to innocent bystanders than the bad guy.
Yeah. It's an interesting discussion because you could make the same argument with vehicles.
Right.
Because obviously there's a standard, right? You have to get your license and you have to be certified. But even there's a lot of wiggle room there. I mean, I remember watching my own kids go through their testing and comparing it to me in Iowa in the 90s. It was vastly different. I mean, we had to, statewide, you had to take a full semester class in high school to get your license, and it was a daily class. It wasn't like 2 days a week. It was an hour every single day for an entire semester, and then spending, weeks or maybe even the last couple of months driving often with these guys.
Well, that's what it was in Texas when I got my license in the late 70s.
Yeah, I mean, now it's an absolute joke. I mean, show up to some place that they've never even met you. You spend 3 minutes in the car. They basically just drive you around the block and they're like, yep, you're good. But again, it's like, where do you draw the line of saying, hey, we live in a free country and you can legitimately do whatever you want? With great freedom comes great responsibility.
Right.
But it's hard to know where to say this is illegal versus not without creating that slippery slope of now allowing government to just take and dictate whatever they want, So I as much as I agree and like I wish people would take it more serious, I don't know how you basically institutionalize that without either trampling on people's rights and making it a pain in the ass for everybody else, but also how realistic is it anyway? Because, you can still carry a gun without a license or it even belonging to you. You can drive somebody else's car with a suspended license, so.
Well, I said, how do you know what you're going to do under pressure? I can point to gun camera tape from an Apache.
Yeah.
That guys, probably we could go on the internet right now and look up that stuff on YouTube, and probably 90% of the stuff that you would see that I could tear it apart, that they're doing things wrong.
Right.
And that was the conversation we would always have amongst ourselves. Like, you need to get better, or you need to do this better, or you need to do that better, because, yeah, they got the job done, but you could do it better.
Yeah.
And these are guys, we're supposed to be professionals, and now, you're under pressure and you don't do it the right way.
Yeah. I think when it comes to it being your profession, there obviously has to be a minimum standard, but that minimum standard has to be enough. It can't be the typical, like, the military, if you're not 5 minutes early or late, it's like,
Right.
well, no, if you want me here at 8, then if you want me here at 7:55, then fucking say 7:55,
Sure.
like don't have a minimum standard and then say, but you better be exceeding that. It's like, well, no, the fucking minimum standard should be enough to satisfy that qualification or certification. But so you're originally from Waco.
Correct.
Tell me a little bit about your childhood, when you grew up, and siblings, sports, just your overall childhood experience.
Well, I was born in 1960 in Waco at Hillcrest Baptist Hospital. Waco back then is probably not a whole lot different. Well, the size is about the same. It hasn't changed size-wise. I'd say the city's probably changed, but I guess it was pretty normal. My dad was a letter carrier. He was a World War II vet. My mom was a housewife. I think she worked a little bit before they got married, but this is the stereotypical, family from the middle-class family.
Yeah.
I've got one brother. He's 12 years older than me. So by the time I was like in elementary school, he was off to college.
Yeah.
I played all the little league sports. I played Pee Wee football. I played little league baseball. Played baseball up until I graduated high school. Actually had a letter to try out in college, but I had the grandiose idea that I was going to be a aeronautical engineer and be a fighter pilot in the Air Force. So I knew that I couldn't play baseball and be an engineer.
Yeah.
So I promptly went to college and screwed off and didn't do either one of those things. I probably like the social aspects of college more than I like actually going to class.
Yeah. I think most people do.
Yeah. So, just typical upbringing. I was in Civil Air Patrol, so that's probably, like I said, I wanted to be in the Air Force. So I was doing all I could, I thought, to prepare myself for that route.
Yeah.
And when you don't do well in college, that kind of ruins, being a fighter pilot in the Air Force.
Yeah.
Uh,
So then the Army looks a little more attractive.
Yeah, I actually got a degree in drafting and design and was working in for a military contractor in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I remember sitting at my drafting board. I worked with engineers who were making parts. I worked at this company who did modifications on military aircraft. So I remember sitting there at that drafting board one day and I go, I can't do this for the rest of my life. And actually, I knew a little bit of how you can go to flight school in the Army. So I knew that you could go to the recruiter even without a 4-year degree and get a flight slot.
Yeah.
So I went down to the recruiter and basically told him I wanted to go to flight school as a warrant officer candidate. And like most recruiters do, and listen up, kids, if you want to go to flight school in the Army and that's what you want to do, don't let the recruiter talk you out of it.
Yeah.
Because I went in there and the recruiter says, well, it's easier to go to flight school if you become like a mechanic and work on helicopters first.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I want to be a pilot. And if you can't get me into flight school, I'm not joining the Army.
Yeah.
So naively, I took the test, didn't use any of these study guides that are available. I didn't even know there were study guides available for all these tests.
Yeah.
Passed all the tests. And got a phone call, hey, this is your date for basic training, and then you'll go to flight school after basic training.
That's amazing that you had whether it's intuition, foresight, or if somebody gave you, a heads up, that because most young adults will get steamrolled and will say, oh, well, I guess that's what I have to do, and so I'll do this. Well, the recruiter said that, and the fact that you, again, just kind of dug your heels in and said no.
Well, I had a neighbor growing up that told me about warrant officer flight training.
Yeah.
And then I was in ROTC in college for the Air Force. And the professor of military science happened to be a Air Force helicopter pilot.
Oh, wow.
So he asked me one day while I was in class or something, where there was a break. And he goes, because I had borrowed a book from him. And he goes, so, like, Dan, why are you doing this? And I said, well, I want to be a pilot. And he goes, well, let me shoot you straight here. Because I was going to ROTC at Baylor, and I wasn't going to Baylor University. I was going to another college in Waco. And he goes, I only have so many flight slots. He goes, and I'm going to give that flight to slots to somebody who's been in my program for the whole 4 years. And if you go to another college, you're probably not going to get one of their flight slots.
Yeah.
And then he told me about warrant officer flight training because he knew about it because Air Force helicopter pilots train at Fort Rucker too. So I think that was probably the first time I'd heard about it. But at the time, I kind of filed that away and said, okay, whatever,
Yeah.
And when that dream kind of died, and like the epiphany, at the drafting board, I remembered that. And so when I went down the recruiter, I went that route.
Yeah. So what year was this?
It was 86. Well, it's probably 85 when I first started.
Yeah.
So I was kind of old.
Yeah.
I was 25.
Yeah. Expectation versus reality, going through boot camp and ultimately to flight school. Was there a huge disparity, or was it about what you thought it would be?
It wasn't, you know how some people will say, it was a life-altering experience. And like, I grew up in a house that was fairly strict. And like, when I played sports, it was still allowable for coaches to scream and yell. And like, so all of that was not, it didn't bother me that much.
Yeah.
I just viewed like, I wasn't physically prepared for it. Like, nobody at the recruiting station made me do push-ups and sit-ups and go run. And so being a 25-year-old that was doing 25-year-old things, I wasn't physically ready to go do that. I'd played sports, so I was athletic. And it's pretty funny, like, they got a bad feeling about me, because, you need to do more push-ups than that, McClinton, blah. But, like, when we played sports, I'm out there, like, because a lot of these kids, for whatever reason, they just aren't coordinated.
Yeah.
So I was able to do well when we played sports, but just, like, doing raw exercises and stuff like that, I wasn't used to doing that.
Yeah. If there's something all of us can believe in, it's hard work, self-reliance, and showing up for the people who count on us. Like our president does for our country, we have to be there for our friends, family, and ourselves. But a while back, I hit a wall. I was spending my nights tossing and turning, getting terrible sleep, and then dragging myself through the next day on fumes. I was in a horrible cycle that had no end in sight whatsoever. I realized that it's not leadership, that it's not running on empty, and I knew that I had to find something to break me out of that cycle. That's when I found Beam's Dream Powder. Beam is proudly founded in America and run by people who share our values: hard work, integrity, and delivering results. It's a healthy nighttime blend packed with science-backed ingredients shown to improve sleep so you can wake up refreshed and ready to take on the day. Dream is made with a powerful blend of all natural ingredients: reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin. It's designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up feeling amazing. And unlike other sleep aids, there's no next day grogginess, just great restful sleep. Plus, Dream tastes incredible, and it's become part of my nightly routine. Simple, easy, and effective. I put Beam's Dream Powder to the test, and on the first night, it was lights out in minutes. No 3 a.m. pacing in the hallway, no 6 a.m. fog. A full week in, and the difference was obvious. Sharper focus at work, more patience at home, and the energy to show up for what I believe in instead of just getting by. Dream is made right here in the United States of America, supporting jobs, quality, and the principles we stand for. There's no shortcuts, no junk, just science-backed ingredients that help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up ready to produce results. So here's the deal. Beam is giving my listeners the ultimate Patriot discount of up to 40% off to try their best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time. Go to shopbeam.com/micdrop and use the code MicDrop at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/micdrop and use the code MicDrop for up to 40% off. Sleep better, wake up stronger, and show up ready for your family, your work, and for your country. Because when you're well rested, you're unstoppable. And this country needs more people like that. If you love talk radio, podcasts, and news, the C. Crane CC Radio 3 delivers exceptional spoken word audio. With separate bass and treble controls, you can tune the sound exactly how you like it, and the clarity makes it feel like your favorite host is right there in the room. C. Crane is a returning sponsor on the podcast. Previously, they sent me their Skywave SSB2 to try out, and now that they've sent their new CC Radio 3 over, I can tell you for sure that it's awesome. The CC Radio 3 pulls in long-range AM/FM stations with exceptional reception and includes emergency features like NOAA weather and the 2-meter ham band. It's got all the bells and whistles, clock, alarm, line-in, antenna jacks, memory presets, and it runs on the included power cord or a set of batteries for over 170 hours, making C. Crane reliable no matter where you are. And with the Bluetooth included, you can stream new episodes of mic drop just like this one on the CC Radio 3 through any smartphone or smart speaker. To order the CC Radio 3, call C. Crane's US-based customer service at 800-522-8863 or visit ccrane.com/drop. That's CCRANE.com/drop and use the code DROP, all caps, all one word, at checkout for 10% off orders over $75. Were there any big hiccups throughout the pipeline until you got to your first duty station?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, like when I started basic training, I had to go to the platoon where they made you do more PT.
The Goon squad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had to do that for a while. That was the only real hiccup. I mean, like I went through basic training. I wasn't the best and I wasn't the worst.
Yeah.
Uh,
As far as flight school goes, my understanding is, because I've had a few other pilots on here, both fixed wing and rotary, is that you go through the same initial flight school all together, and then you branch off into either fixed or rotary. Did you go through just a specific helo flight school?
well, the way the Army does it, it's all helicopters.
Oh, okay.
So if you're coming what they call street to seat, or what they used to call high school or flight school, after basic training, you go to Warrant Officer Candidate School, which is 6 weeks, which back then was like T-shirt rolling and PT.
Yeah.
And they would just mess with you. And it was more like, how much do you want to do what it is that you're going to do? Obviously, it's not Hell Week, but it was like they were just screwing with us.
It was basically just 6 more weeks of boot camp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd fill up there was drainage ditches out in front of the barracks, and they'd take sandbags and seal them off and fill them up with water, and we'd do push-ups till you get muscle failure and you fall in, you get wet.
Yeah. Then
you low crawl around the barracks. Okay, everybody go back inside. Now you've destroyed your common areas because you're all filthy, and they just created more work. The whole point of the whole thing, they'd give you more tasks than you could possibly do. So they're trying to teach you how to do mitigate. Like, okay, what's going to get me in trouble the least?
like prioritizing.
Prioritize things.
Yeah.
They're trying to teach you prioritization.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me a long time to realize what they're trying to teach you, because at the time you're just like, oh, they're just fucking with me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was prepared to deal with it because I was just going to put up with whatever I needed to put up with to get where I needed to go.
Right.
But the method to their madness didn't really dawn on. It was attention to detail and prioritization of tasks.
Yeah.
And they've kind of done away with most of that now because I guess folks don't react well to having stress put on them. They don't want to deal with that.
Yeah. Which, to me is a huge misstep on our military's part, because combat, you're going to run into heavy amounts of that no matter what. So I do feel like the military has shifted a little too soft in the last decade plus, but hopefully it's cyclical and it'll come back around to especially with our current administration. My hope is that they hit the reset button a little bit on that. But I'm curious, flight school wise, anything stand out as being super memorable, or again, were there any big hiccups, or did you breeze through?
Oh yeah, like when the first, I don't know how many weeks it is now because it's been forever since we went to flight school, but the first portion of it was called primary, and back then we flew in a TH-55, which is you want to look it up, it's a Hueys 300 helicopter, which is a little two-place. It was piston engine. I swear, like, we would ride the bus out to the flight line from the barracks. And sometimes on those bus rides, I go, well, I guess I'm going to be an infantryman, because I just wasn't getting it. I couldn't hover, and they call it the hover button when you get it. But like my IP was what we call a screamer, and that guy was like would yell at me. He'd take out a pointer and was like hitting me over my flight helmet with it. Attitude, airspeed. Like, what are you trying to do? Kill me? The whole hour in that helicopter was just him
berating you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that the biggest struggle for you in flight school, was hovering?
Yeah, getting past that IP. I didn't realize at the time you can ask for an IP change.
And is that what does IP stand?
Instructor pilot.
Okay. You didn't know that you could do that, but you could have.
It's kind of looked down upon.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to put my head down and get it done, and I did.
Yeah.
Probably better for it.
Right.
But like I was telling somebody a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to somebody about learning how to fly, and it was actually a friend of mine. She was learning how to fly. And I said, I don't think you want to ask me about my experiences learning how to fly, because like when you pay somebody to teach you how to fly,
you're their customer.
Yeah, you're their customer, and you should tell them what you want, and don't put up with something that you don't want.
Yeah.
I said, the people that taught me how to fly, they didn't care whether I passed or failed or whatever. They tried to impart knowledge upon me, and it was up to me to get it.
Right. Where was your first? Well, actually, before we get into your first duty station as a helo pilot, is there a way to analogize what learning how to fly is that most people could relate to?
I think a lot of people think it's you got to be smart. And I don't think that's the case, because, I think these people of all levels of intelligence can learn how to fly.
Yeah.
It's a lot of it is just figuring out how to make your hands and feet do what they need to do to make the aircraft do that you're in charge of that aircraft, and I'm going to make it do what it needs to do.
Is it purely a hand-eye coordination thing, or is there more to it than that? Like if you say, for example, your extensive experience playing a lot of different sports, I assume that would be advantageous for learning how to fly. But is it just hand-eye coordination, or is there more to it than that?
Well, there's some interpretation of what you're seeing, and making what you see happen, or making the instruments do what you need to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of it, I'd say probably 75% of it is hand-eye coordination. And with guys, a lot of the time we're over, brute force. Guys want to make things happen.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of over-controlling going on.
Yeah.
And you might hear people say that women make good pilots, and that's generally true, because they tend not to try to muscle things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And guys will just, especially when you get tense or you're under stress, you tense up, and that makes it harder to fly, actually.
Yeah. So almost maybe kind of, I mean, not that I'm a surgeon or can even pretend to be in the mind of one, but kind of similarly that way, where there's a finesse to it that.
Yeah, to be good at it, there's a lot of finesse to it.
Yeah. So where was your first duty station?
I graduated flight school in October of '87, and I had orders to Fort Hood, Texas.
Oh, right in your backyard again.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you start out flying the AH-64? Or?
No, actually, I was a UH-1 guy.
Oh, wow. Good old Huey, huh?
So I flew Hueys for about 10 years.
Oh, okay. What was the shift because they phased it out? Or was there more to it?
Well, when you go through, depending on your class rank and what's available, you get to pick. And when I went through flight school, I actually wanted to be a Cobra guy.
Yeah.
Because the Army still had Cobras. And that didn't happen. And where I was in the class, just due to my mediocrity, I ended up flying Hueys, which, in hindsight, that was probably the best thing to happen, because it caused me, I went to a job where you had to be like a jack of all trades. The unit I was assigned to was, it's called general support. So the company I was in, we actually flew the division commander for the 2nd Armored Division.
Oh, wow.
We did other stuff, but that was one of the primary things that we did.
What other things were you doing beyond that?
Well, if there was a unit that needed, I was assigned to 2nd Armored Division. So if, say, the division long-range patrol needed an insertion, we'd go do it.
Okay.
So we did a little bit of everything. And believe it or not, when you fly VIPs, you had to be able to plan in a hurry. Because you'd get a phone call like the general needs to go here right now. So you'd have to pull out a map, or if you flew the general to some command post out in the middle of the field, his aide would come out and give you a grid and say, this is where we're going. And this is for the days of GPS. So I had to be able to pull out a map, plot that point, and then figure out how we were going to get there.
Oh.
Sometimes tactically, because if we're playing war games, because this is like the Cold War, you'd have to fly low altitude, so you'd use nap of the earth, the terrain to mask yourself and get to where we were going.
Do you know, present day, how much of that is still part of training, if any?
And I had a conversation because a friend of mine is a civilian at Fort Rucker who works with the people on the staff there to try and not fix flight school, but say what's important. We're going to concentrate on doing this, doing that. And I noticed towards the end of my career, and I graduated in 2011, that a lot of that nap of the earth, reading maps, a lot of that stuff was going away. Because you get in the aircraft now, you just plug in coordinates and the moving map, and a line appears on your map. And a lot of that stuff that we concentrated on in the Cold War, well, first of all, it wasn't important in the global war on terror, because me breaking line of sight with a radar was not something anybody ever thought about.
Yeah.
So a lot of that stuff, it may have been talked about, but the emphasis on it wasn't there.
Yeah. I mean, we have kind of a similar issue, I would say, in special operations, in that when I first came in, GPSs existed, but not really. We weren't using them, other than just like a familiarization kind of thing. But, otherwise, overwhelmingly, all of our navigation was map and compass. And, to me, there's a very important component of being able to do that, not just in case the GPS shits the bed. That's obvious, in that, you have to be able to have a backup. But I also think really no different than driving around town. You should still know where you're going, and know well, my GPS must be fucked up because I shouldn't be right here. You should know those things.
Sure.
And I think, especially nowadays, kids in their teens and early 20s, they plug shit in their phone and they're like, I have no idea where I'm at, and I think that's a bad reliance to have. But I see that happening more and more in the military, where now it's kind of reversed, where it's we'll do a map and compass FAM. It's okay, yeah, you've done it once, you understand the mechanism, but otherwise you're using GPS and SATs for everything. I guess from a real world standpoint, did you ever run into issues in combat where you had to rely on line of sight and map reading type of navigation?
I would look at maps. That's hard to say, because I would always look at maps because that's the way I was trained. So, if I was sitting in the TOC, and we got a mission to go support somebody somewhere, I'd always look at the map and look at the terrain around it and think about, okay, if, say we were going to support some SF unit, taking down a house out in the middle of nowhere, I would look at the terrain and said, okay, if I was a squirter, if I was going to squirt out of that house, where would I go based on that terrain? And I'd look at that, and then I'd think about, okay, when we're covering this house for them, I got to keep an eye on this gully, because somebody might come out, duck down in that gully and try to get away. And it's hard for me to say, because I'd always talk to my team about that. So I don't know if the junior pilots, if I was telling them something that they had never thought about, or if they were thinking the same thing, because we never had that conversation.
Yeah.
Because I was always like usually the senior pilot
Yeah.
on that mission. So nobody's gonna like, um, so that is a good question. I wonder,
Yeah.
because I would always look at it that way.
Yeah.
And my secondary job was as the mission planner for the battalion. So when I'd go about mission planning, I'd always look at the map. I'd always look at terrain.
Yeah.
So I'm curious now, like to go see how people like go about it now.
Right. But yeah, I think, if there's any contingency, you've got to know, I mean, we do that in combat swimmer like, exclusively. I mean, I assume that they're still doing it the same way, where it's a compass board and you look at a chart and, you're making corrections or adjustments for tide and current and swell and everything. And so you may say, okay, on the map, we're going to swim or dive combat swimmer wise a 130 bearing for 9 minutes. But because the current is what it is, it actually needs to be a 140.
Right.
And for 11 minutes, because it's going to push us, which is going to slow us down, And so just understanding that, I think, and studying the map to a degree, because when you're underwater, you have no comms, can't see jack shit. And you have one other guy with you that you can't talk to, you're using hand signals and squeezes and stuff. So you have to know, like, okay, well, our bearing is 140, right? Because it's corrected. There's a row of pilings here. So I know if we hit a row of pilings that we overshot it
Sure.
and but it's like studying that map and knowing from here to there and everything in between, you do really have to memorize those things so that if you are off track or you do, evade an RPG or something, and now you're like, fuck, I don't know where we're at, like that's super important. And I think that type of mentality happens less and less nowadays with GPS.
I tend to agree with you. I mean, I would build route cards, and you're looking for the turn point, and you're looking for this or that, and I would always label it like, okay, we're going to turn at this road intersection, and you're going to see this or that, or there would be, if you see this, we've gone too far, that kind of thing. When we'd brief the mission, like, okay, we're going down this route, and if you cross over these power lines, okay, we've gone too far.
Yeah.
Or if you see this,
Yeah.
then we've gone too far.
Yeah.
And you hope that carries on, because like when I'm briefing it, I'm briefing all the junior guys.
All those same things.
Yeah. So, and when we'd have them brief, like when they're becoming a pilot in command, that's the sort of stuff we'd expect to see.
Yeah.
Now, if that carried on, it's kind of like a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox. Like,
Yeah.
okay, is it losing fidelity, or are you guys carrying on and doing the same thing, even though, or are you getting lazy because I've got a GPS that tells me this is, fly this direction and then do this?
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. So spending the 10 years flying the Huey, at what point were you communicated to that now you're switching over airframes, and how did that shake out, and what did you think about it?
Well, let's see, in the 91, 92, I was down in Central America. And I was at the point in my warrant officer career where I had to make my decision. We have tracks. So you're like maintenance, you're an instructor pilot, you're a safety officer at that time. So I wanted to be an instructor pilot because they get the most flight time. And that didn't work out because they were like, we don't have any slots. And I was going to PCS permanent change of station. I was going to leave Honduras / El Salvador and go. was trying to go to Fort Campbell because I thought I wanted to be in the 160th. That's kind of a side story that we can get into, but my boss in Honduras was actually a 160th Little Bird guy who was getting his battalion command in the conventional army.
Were you doing counter-narcotic stuff down there?
We were actually, when I was in Honduras, we would support like there's a thing called Fortress Caminos, where they were doing civil affairs kind of stuff.
Okay.
And when I was in El Salvador, we flew for U.S. Mill Group El Salvador. Actually supported SEALs, SF dudes.
Oh, cool.
We would fly around the ComSec guys. We would fly the SF guys and the SEALs out to the places where they were doing advisory missions. And we had a standby mission in case like something went wrong to get people out. But I assume we got shot at, but aircraft never got hit. But we took measures to make sure survivability moves and stuff like that. But that, until I went to the Global War on Terror, that was probably the most rewarding job I ever had, flying in El Salvador.
Yeah. Any, I guess, real-world missions of moving special operations guys around that you can talk about?
It wasn't any, we moved them around to different locations, but there wasn't any, it wasn't like you need to evacuate somebody or there wasn't urgency or we weren't doing an insertion, combat insertion, that sort of thing. It was all admin kind of stuff that we were doing.
No Hamburger Hill hot inserts and extracts?
No, none of that.
All right, so I guess back to when you were told that you were, or I guess you wanted to be a flight instructor, ends up that not panning out.
I ended up going to the maintenance course at Fort Eustis. And everybody knew, like in the 90s, like the UH-1 was probably going away shortly. I didn't want to be, and this kind of goes to the people that my fellow aviators in Honduras who flew UH-60s. Being around those guys made me not want to be a UH-60 pilot.
Yeah.
Because they were kind of, and this is the whole reason like that Danger Pig name started. The 60 guys would call Hueys pig boats. It was a derisive, because it was ancient technology, like an aircraft left over from the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
It wasn't a Black Hawk. And they had the advanced aircraft, and we were all flying this slug is another word for it.
Yeah.
So we were the guys that had the mission in El Salvador. We were getting danger pay, imminent danger pay. They weren't. And they couldn't understand why this Huey was doing this ancient helicopter, and they call us, pig boat drivers and stuff like that. So we kind of turned it around and called it, no, we're not, we're danger pigs.
Yeah.
Drew a little picture of a pig on the nose of our helicopter. And so that's where that name came from.
Oh, that's cool.
But dealing with those guys down there made me not want to be a Black Hawk pilot. Now, the majority of the Black Hawk pilots I've met in my life are okay. They're cool guys and gals. There's nothing wrong with them. But just that experience made me not want to be a Black Hawk pilot at the time. Having flown with and known some guys that flew Kiowa Warriors, I actually wanted to do that job. Couldn't get that job. So for the time being, I was a UH-1 maintenance test pilot. And I ended up coming back to Fort Hood, ended up being like the battalion production control officer, which was the guy who sets the maintenance priorities for the battalion.
So super fun stuff.
Yeah. Late hours, dealing with maintenance, making sure, and being the maintenance guy for the battalion, I was in charge of maintenance on Black Hawks, OH-58s, and Hueys.
Oh, wow.
And even with all of that, this is during the Clinton administration, after the Gulf War. I didn't get picked up for CW3.
Hmm.
So I wanted to stay in the Army, went up to DC to try and find out, talk to my career manager to find out what, was there anything I could do to get promoted? Went up there, talked to him, and he goes, "Well, I've looked at your folder and looked at your career. Other than being a UH-1 pilot, I can't see any reason why you didn't get promoted. So is there anything I can do?" Kind of hemmed and hawed, like, "I don't know. So you're telling me I
Tough
don't."
shit.
Yeah. And so at that time, they were offering guys, I want to say close to $50,000 to get out.
Really?
Yeah. Because it was the peace dividend, at the end of the Cold War, Clinton administration, they were cutting back on everything. So I didn't see any path going forward, so I took the money and got out. I was in the IRR, the inactive reserves. Worked for a company got a job working for a company called Petroleum Helicopters, and was flying offshore in Louisiana out to the oil rigs.
Just like shuttling employees back and forth?
Out to the oil rigs in the Gulf.
Yeah.
I heard about a program then. The Army realized that they let too many people go. So they had a program that they were like letting people come back in. And it was after a hurricane evac. So the way it works out in the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America, the way it works is they want to leave people on the platform till the last minute, because when you shut down that rig, they're losing money because they're not pumping oil. So naturally, they want to wait till the last minute when there's a hurricane coming to get people off. So I ended up flying a hurricane evac through the outer bands of a hurricane. We're like flat pitch on a oil rig, and I could see 90 knots on the airspeed indicator.
Yeah.
And guys are virtually like crawling out to the helicopter to get on the helicopter.
How difficult was that maintaining station?
Well, even if you're flat pitch, if it's 90 knots, that aircraft's flying. So you're just holding the controls steady. And quite honestly, doing that, we went back and forth to that platform 4 or 5 times that day. And the guy I was flying with had worked for that company for, 15, 20 years. He was a Vietnam vet. And he could tell that I was not happy. And he told me, just one more and then we'll be done. So at the end of that day, I decided I don't care that I don't have another job, but they're not paying me enough money to risk my life to do that.
Yeah.
I go, if it said United States Army on that tail boom, and I was doing something worthwhile, I can see risking my life, but not for Conoco or Exxon or whoever it was that we were flying for.
Yeah, because they wanted to minimize financial
yeah,
loss.
and I went in and told my supervisor, I gave him, because we worked week on, week off. I said, I'm not coming back next shift. I said, I didn't care that I didn't have another job, but I'll find something to do, but I'm not doing that anymore. Yeah. And I've told people since, I go, I was more scared doing that than I was ever scared with rounds flying past the canopy in the Army, because you can't do anything about a hurricane. It's like, that was nuts. We came out of one of those rain bands one day, and we saw the hurricane hunter, and he comes up on guard and goes, "What are you guys doing out here?" I go, yeah, I asked myself that question. But yeah, I quit. And it's like right after that, I applied to go back in the Army.
Assuming they took you right back in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of the deal was to come back in, you got to go to the Apache course.
Oh, okay.
Because at that time, there were a lot of people getting out, of the Apaches, like quitting the Army, because there was a cycle, because it was undermanned, of people stay in the States 2 years, go to Korea for a year, come back for 2 years, go back to Korea. And there was just divorce after divorce because people are just like, their families couldn't take it. And so they needed people for the Apache side. And so I came back in and went to the AH-64 Alpha course. And that was 98.
How difficult or big of a shift was it going from Hueys to oil rig civilian choppers to now flying kind of the bread and butter of attack helicopters?
So obviously the mission's different. And anybody that's been in both worlds could probably tell you the mindset of the people who fly them is a little different.
Yeah.
Now, it's something, if you remember talking back when I was in flight school, I wanted to be an attack pilot, so that part of it was not a problem. I don't know if you've ever heard of the bag.
Mm.
So when you go through the Apache qualification, part of it is they have to teach you how to use that monocle that's over your eye. So when you're flying at night, you're looking through this monocle to use a FLIR, a forward-looking infrared, to fly off of. And it's giving you flight information, and it's also giving you a picture. So to teach you to do that, they put you in the backseat of an Apache, and they completely seal it off from the world. So you're flying, and it's called the bag, and you're just flying using this monocle. And to me, other people may not feel this way, but to me, that was the hardest thing flying-wise I've ever had to do in my life.
Was it because it was so different than what you were used to? Or?
Oh yeah, it's like I flew night vision goggles, and it's nothing like that.
Yeah.
Because there was a little bit of, sometimes there's this, what you're looking through is, I forget how many feet forward and down it is from where you're actually sitting. So the sensor is not connected to your eye like NVGs are.
Yeah. It was a different sight picture of.
Right. And when you're trying to do hover tasks, the aircraft hovers basically like this. So you're looking at a picture that's a little bit different than your mind actually levels your, even though the aircraft is hovering at a tail low attitude, when you look with your eyes, you see the horizon as the horizon. It's like you've got your own self-leveling system, your brain does.
Yeah.
But the FLIR is not level. The FLIR is at that angle, whatever.
That would be wild. I can see why that would be a challenge.
So you have to work through some of those issues.
Did you encounter students that couldn't figure that out, that end up getting washed out of that airframe? Or
I don't think there were any in my class. I know that there were some. There's some people that just can't deal with it.
Yeah.
And you find out what, if you didn't know before going there, you find out which eye is dominant.
Yeah.
I'm left-handed. I'm left eye dominant.
Same here.
And that reticle, or that monocle, is over my right eye, and you can't change it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I had to fly around a lot with, closing my left eye.
That seems strange that they don't make a, not ambidextrous, but a monocle for each if you are left eye dominant, that you couldn't switch it over.
Yeah, you just have to learn how to work through it.
Yeah. That seems counterproductive.
And believe me, if there was a little pinhole, because you'd fly the bag in the day. So it's broad daylight out there, and you're flying around blacked out in the back. If there's a little pinhole and there was light coming through, my left eye would go right to that light source.
Yeah.
So we flew around with a bag, a roll of 100-mile-an-hour tape to tape up those holes and everything.
Wow. Obviously, flying a rotary wing aircraft, the mechanics, fundamentals, principles are all pretty similar, airframe to airframe. But I'm curious, going from a Huey to an Apache, is that kind of like going from a truck to a Ferrari a little bit in terms of it being so much more mobile and light and maneuverable?
It is, yeah, the controls are a lot more responsive, especially on an A model is actually more responsive and quicker and all that sort of thing than a D model is.
Like
So,
noticeable.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a little bit of a learning curve. And also when I started that course, I hadn't flown in a while. So even though it's like riding a bike and you kind of have to catch up. And the course it's not condensed, but it's a pretty long course, but there's phases, and they want to get you through that contact portion pretty fast to get to the contact's just basic. You're just flying around a helicopter and you do the emergency procedures that they want you to learn. But it's a helicopter. It flies like a helicopter. It's just getting used to how it flies.
Yeah.
They want to get to the hard stuff, which is the bag, which I think was like right after contact. And then you get to the portion where you're learning how to use the aircraft to do the things it's meant to do. And they put you in the front seat and you do all the gunnery stuff up there.
Yeah. How long is the entire course to learn?
Man, I want to say it was like 6 months. It's long.
And I assume that anybody going through that has already spent time flying otherwise. Like you wouldn't
Right.
go straight to that from flight school, or would you?
Now they've changed the way they do training now from when it was that I went to that course. There were some folks that were right out of flight school, but you'd graduate flight school with almost 200 hours of flight time. So it's not like you're complete. And they kind of controlled who they sent there out of flight school.
Yeah.
But now half of flight school is in the aircraft that you're going to fly in the field. So they're sending, after the instrument portion of flight school, they're sending kids directly to the Apache now.
Oh, wow. Do you think that's a good idea or a bad idea?
It's always a better idea to get people more hours and more air sense. So any way they can figure out to do that.
In the aircraft they're going to be flying.
Well, I've got my own feelings about that. I think they need to have more hours before they go to something complex.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's people that would argue with me about that, but there's always a balance in that training community about money spent. My opinion is, let's put it that way. My opinion is, the more people they kick out on the front end, the better off we are on the back end.
Yeah.
They need to make it harder. Because there were people who washed out when I went through flight school. The goal of flight school, though, is to graduate everybody who starts, and I don't think that's a good thing. Because, like, I don't want to. Obviously, it's never going to be like special forces, but the way I can compare it to is like a high-end college. Like, if you don't flunk anybody out, is your course worth anything?
Yeah. Well, I think, instead of graduating everybody who started, it should be upholding a minimum standard and getting as many people who meet that through as possible, irrespective of how many start. I think that's the better way to approach it.
Well, I agree with you. I think the problem is they look at it from a money point of view. Like,
Yeah.
they've invested X amount of dollars in somebody.
Yeah.
So we have to get that person through.
Yeah.
So if that means that I wash them or I make them fall back and start that phase over again, if we can graduate that person, it's better.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily agree with that because not everybody who starts
Should finish.
should finish.
Yeah. Once you finish that, what was the first command that you went to afterward?
So I finished the A model course. Actually, I signed into the unit that I was going to end up going to at Fort Hood before I went to the Apache course. Because they said, welcome back to active duty. You're assigned to this unit. Fort Hood will send you to Fort Rucker to go to the Apache course. So I was in the 4th Infantry Division. I was in 1st Battalion, 4th Aviation in 4ID at Fort Hood.
So you went right back there?
Yeah.
And what was that? So this is what, 99?
Yeah.
Ish?
Ish, yeah.
From 99 until September 11th, what did that look like? And how did September 11th impact you in your career?
And what's funny is, and this is how 9/11 impacted the whole AH-64 community. When I got there, we were practicing Cold War. Okay, I'm going to take a company of Apaches, which is 6 or 8, and I'm going to go deep across the forward line of troops, the FLOT. I'm going to set up and I'm going to take out rear echelon forces that are intended to reinforce like a main force attack, which was the whole reason for being of the AH-64, to take out tanks. So we'd practice that. We would take off from Fort Hood and fly like over 100 miles out west of Fort Hood. And we'd look on a map and, like, say there was a bunch of buildings out there in the middle of nowhere. We're going to notionally attack that and plan out this attack, go do it down to the second. Go cross FLOT. We're flying nap of the earth, 100 plus miles.
Yeah.
Hit this target, notionally, not shooting anything. Turn around, fly back, or go someplace, get gas, fly back, do something else.
Pre 9/11, how often were you doing actual live gun runs?
An attack battalion probably does gunnery like twice a year.
Yeah. Do you think that is woefully inadequate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I even thought so then, because like anything else, the more you do something, the better off you get at it. And employing an attack helicopter it's not complicated because the aircraft is made to do that, but there's specific things that you have to do it correctly.
Right.
And the more you get those rote steps, the more you do those rote steps, the better off you're going to be, muscle memory wise, when it comes to putting rounds down range under stress.
Yeah. What is the, I know it depends on configuration, but what is the overall armament capability of an Apache?
Well, it can carry up to, I want to say 16 Hellfire.
Do you know about what those weigh each in terms
About
of
100
explosive?
pounds.
Is that 100 pounds of explosive weight?
Well, the missile weighs 100 pounds. And the standard missile was made to take out a tank. So the warhead it would put out this molten copper slug that's designed to work its way through the armor of a tank. So the actual explosive warhead wasn't all that much. It was more of a shape charge kind of thing.
Okay.
There was an F model that had like a dual warhead that was made to go up against like the reactive armor.
Yeah, like a HEDP round kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then later on in the GWAT, we had a Kilo model and a Kilo 2 Alpha that had a blast frag sleeve.
You said it could carry up to 16?
Yeah.
Did it carry anything else, or is it just machine
guns?
Well,
we carry rocket pods. So we had 36-shot rocket pod on, usually carried them on the outboard. So there's 4 stations. So the 2 outboard were usually rockets, and the 2 inboard were for Hellfire.
The rocket pods, what size explosive weight wise are each of those?
Well, it's a 70 millimeter rocket, and it would have I want to say 12-pound HE warhead.
Okay.
Or we could carry, it was called a DPICM. Oh, now I'm getting it confused with artillery. but it would have little bomblets. We could carry those, or flechette rockets.
Yeah.
And we ended up carrying a lot of flechettes and GUI.
Yeah. So the rocket pod, you can have 16 on each side.
36.
36. One of those, to put it in kind of reference to the listener or viewer, say this building as an example, would one of those 36 rounds...
I'm sorry. You're right. It's a 19 shot.
On each side?
Yeah.
Okay. It's still a lot. I mean, would one of those, if you drilled it center mass through the roof of this building, kill everybody in here?
A rocket? Probably not. It would probably, if it came in through the roof of this room, it'd probably wound everybody in the room.
Yeah. Probably take you out of fighting at least. Probably. And you're carrying 38 of those?
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus 16 Hellfires on each side?
Well, no. If I were carrying rockets, I could carry 8 Hellfire.
Okay. 8 on each side or 4 on each side?
4 on each side.
Okay. A Hellfire for sure is fucking everybody in this room up, right? I know it's a
I mean, I've
charge.
seen a Hellfire hit a car and seen a dude get out of the car and start running.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, that's got to be depressing.
I mean, that's why they went to that blast frag sleeve.
Yeah.
It depends on the Hellfire we shot. Like if you shot a November into this room, which has got a thermobaric warhead, it would kill everybody in this room.
Yeah. Machine gun wise, what caliber is it?
It was a 30 millimeter cannon.
How many rounds?
It has the capability of 1,200, but in Iraq we would fly with an aux tank, so it cut it down to like 300.
And
aux fuel cell, sorry.
Yeah. Cyclic rate wise, 300. How many rounds per minute is that firing?
Don't get me lying, because it's been so long since I've flown that stupid thing. We would set bursts in the cockpit, so normally it'd be either a 10 round or a 20 round burst.
Yeah. Okay. Either way, 300 rounds isn't lasting very damn long, right?
To be honest, like, I can't think of too many times in Iraq that we went Winchester on 30.
Yeah.
Because, if you did what you were doing the way you were supposed to do it, it usually only took a couple of bursts to take care of business.
Yeah. That's awesome. So 9/11 happens.
Mm-hmm.
Where were you? What was going through your mind? How did that shift your career when it happened?
So when 9/11 went down, I was the 4th Infantry Division Aviation Brigade Tactical Operations Officer. So I'd been assigned to brigade, and I changed. You know how I said I was a maintenance test pilot in the UH-1 world. When I went over to Apaches because I wanted to go home at night, I changed my specialty to TAC Ops, which is somebody who concentrates on tactics and mission planning, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I was up at brigade, which is a level up from battalion. And I was actually in a class learning how to use like this newfangled stuff called the Command Post of the Future. Because the 4th Infantry Division at that time was called the Digital Division. So it was implementing all this stuff that would become commonplace during GUI. So I was in a class learning how to use Command Post of the Future. And an instructor came in the class and said, hey, can't remember if he said like a plane hit the World Trade Center or just told us to go back to our units. But anyhow, the class was called off and they said, go back to your unit. And obviously when I got back to my office, it was obvious that something had gone down because they had opened up all the secret vaults and they were pulling out. As far as they were concerned, we were going to war tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're pulling out stuff and trying to figure out what it is. We didn't end up doing anything, but, we were getting ready in case we had to go.
Did that change the trajectory of your job and what you were planning on doing, or was it kind of a false alarm and you ended up kind of staying in the same path until you actually deployed?
I mean, I stayed in that job. I don't remember if I was on orders yet, but I ended up going to, because like I said, I was an A model Apache guy. I ended up going to a unit that was fielding the D model. And the way the Army did it is like if you were in a unit that was getting the Longbow Apache, they all went to Fort Hood, they got together and they trained up as a group, and then they were certified combat ready, and then they'd go off to wherever they were supposed to go to. So I got orders to 3rd Squadron 6 Cav. And shortly after 9/11, that unit started forming at Fort Hood. And I had to go back to Fort Rucker at that time to get qualified in the Longbow Apache.
Could you summarize in, we'll say layman's terms, the difference between all the different Apache models?
So an A model, in layman's terms, is an analog Apache, and a D model is a digital.
Okay.
So the communications are digital. It's got a glass cockpit, which means all the displays are on like 2 displays instead of a bunch of different dials and stuff like that. So in the most simple terms, that's basically what it is.
Okay. And you mentioned a Kilo model and those are Delta models, but with extra stuff on them?
Oh, I was talking about a Kilo model Hellfire.
Oh, okay. So basically, Apache-wise, there's just 2 models, basically, A and D.
Well, now there's an E model, but I never flew that.
Okay. So you learned on the analog. So you learned on the stick shift.
Yeah.
And then go to the dual clutch automatic.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Was that a huge shift?
It's not as huge as going from flying a Huey to an Apache. I think the biggest change in being a D model guy, because it has so much more information available to you as a pilot, figuring out what I want, where I want it, and how to use all the information that I'm getting.
Yeah. Okay. At what point did you first deploy in a combat capacity with that airframe? Was it Iraq or did you do any Afghanistan?
It was Iraq.
Iraq. And that was the 06, 07 one?
No, actually, it was 2004. So I went to Korea with 3/6 Cav, and I was over there doing that mission, which was kind of weird because we had an overwater mission where we would, in the event of a war with North Korea, we were going to interdict there was a belief that they would send, for lack of a better term, like inflatables, small boats south to go behind our lines. So it was going to be our mission to go out there and like take those boats out.
Oh, okay. So a lot of overwater training.
Yeah, we actually worked with the Navy a lot to Navy UH-60 units, and we worked with a destroyer actually.
Oh, wow.
Vectoring our aircraft onto targets.
Yeah. That's cool. Did you do any shipboard landings and takeoffs?
Some guys did, and this kind of goes back to the whole reason why I never went to the 160th is because I can't swim.
Really?
Yeah.
Still?
I just never learned how to swim, and I tried, and it just wasn't happening.
Yeah. There's a lake not far from here if you want a little extracurricular activity. I'll teach you.
So I couldn't pass the dunker.
Yeah, I got you.
So there wasn't any. I didn't fly any of those offshore missions.
Yeah. All right. So after you finished your stint in Korea, you end up with your first deployment to Iraq, which is the 2004 timeframe. The second Iraq deployment was the longer, more intense one, but I assume that even in 04, though, you guys stayed busy and still did some decent stuff. Or what was that deployment like? And also, at that point, you'd been in the military for quite a while. You'd been training to go to war. You know, essentially, the whole point of joining the military is an understanding that chance exists.
Right.
What was going through your head as you find yourself finally boots on the ground in Iraq in a combat deployment role, flying an attack helicopter? Like, what's going through your mind?
So what's crazy about that is I got back to Fort Hood, and the unit that I was going to be assigned to was already deployed.
Hmm.
So they basically told me, get your desert uniforms, get all your shots, get all that stuff, and then we'll put you on a plane. It was me and about 3 or 4 other replacements went over. So I got there in May of '04, and the unit had been on the ground already for like 3 or 4 months, something like that. So I got to Camp Taji, Iraq. We flew up in a C-130 to Balad, and then I got on a Chinook. And so in the middle of the night, I'm dragging my bags off the back of this Chinook at some place I've never been to before. And it's black as dark as shit out there. And I just get off the back of this Chinook, and I don't know where I'm going, and somebody's yelling at me. And somehow or another, I end up like at the battalion headquarters. So it's kind of disorienting. It's almost like I'm going through the SEER course or something.
Yeah.
So I get there, and they say, okay, you're going to be in this company, because I hadn't even really signed into the unit. So I go see the S1, and they tell me, okay, you're going to be in this company, and go see Captain Kawika tomorrow morning. And so they took me to my trailer. So everybody had a trailer. All the pilots had a trailer that you lived in.
Like together, or you had your own?
No, I had my own single wide trailer. Had a bed, and a wardrobe. You had to walk down the street to go to the bathroom or take a shower, but had our own trailer to live in.
Yeah.
And they were like set side by side. So like I had a couple of neighbors, but and they had sandbags stacked up around them. So if we took indirect, unless you took a direct hit, you're okay.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a different experience. And then, like anytime you go to a new unit, you have to go through what's called a readiness level progression. You're a new pilot, so you had to get with an instructor pilot, and they had to check you out and make sure you knew all the stuff. They had to do that in country.
How long was that?
It was like for me, it wasn't that. It was maybe 2 or 3 flights.
Oh, okay.
And they took us out. We shot and kind of give us local area orientation, where they flew us around and let us see what everything looked like before it was the first time.
Right.
And then we started flying missions. And I think I got put on the night shift at first, which was probably the best thing for somebody who's new, because the Iraqi bad guys were light activated even then.
Yeah.
There
wasn't a lot of activity at night.
No, I mean, and that's when I say the night shift, I'm talking about the deep night shift.
Right.
Like we got done when the sun was coming up.
Yeah.
So it took off at like 2 a.m. and get off at 06.
Who were you supporting at that point?
So this is probably what most people don't get about Army aviation. So when we'd go brief for a mission, the operations guys would sit us down and go, okay, these are the missions you're going to do tonight, and like hand you a stack full of papers and say, from this time to this time, you're going to support this unit who's doing a cordon and search at this location. From this time to this time, I want you to do convoy security for this unit that's doing a convoy from here to there. And it was up to us to plan when we needed to go get gas or stuff like that. And then if anything unusual occurred, they'd pull us off those missions to go do, like, say, if there was a troops in contact or a medevac that we needed to give escort to, they would retask you.
Yeah.
But there was a battle space that we were responsible for. We were working multinational division Baghdad is who we worked for. So we had a map actually that was divided up into who owned what land. And in theory, if I was over some unit's land, I needed to be up their frequency because they could fire artillery, they could send up a UAV, so you needed to know what was going on in that battle space.
Yeah.
But ideally, we were tasked to some unit while we were flying around. If other than that, we were given reconnaissance priorities that we were going to go look at someplace that they suspected that's where somebody was going to try and set up mortars or rockets, try to interdict that sort of thing. Or if we were doing route security, you go looking to make sure people weren't implanting IEDs.
Yeah.
Try and find that.
Do you remember that? Well, I guess before we get into some of the missions that you flew, are you flying the same aircraft every time, or are you jumping in a new one or a different one, like our pilots sharing aircraft? And
so when you're assigned to a company, you go down to the crew chief's office. Those are the guys that maintain them, and say, "What's my aircraft for today?"
Okay.
And they would give you the tail number that was going to fly because they're trying. Each aircraft only has so many hours before it goes into what's called a phase, and that's when major maintenance is done.
Yeah.
So they try to manage what's called a phase flow. So they would try to manage which aircraft were flying, what days.
Is there any difference at all? It probably seems like an ignorant question, but when you get in one aircraft, if it's the same model, is it the exact same, or do guys personalize it a little bit? Like, do you bring shit with you that you put in there or anything like that?
Well, every aircraft is like getting in a different car. It has its own personality. But as far as what's inside the cockpit, it's all pretty much set up the same. Now, you're supposed to shut things down a certain way, and you get in some aircraft and they go, "That dumbass forgot to turn that off." But
so even though it's an AH-64 Delta, and there's however many of them, let's say there's 20 of them, you can tell the difference between them. Like it has a different personality, like the way that it flies. Like there'll be a nuance as to how it flies. Even
most aircraft are pretty much the same, but there's aircraft that get reputations that,
really,
like, "Oh, I don't want to fly that one," because it's just problems every time.
yeah. Huh.
Like anymore, they're like big computers, right? So there are aircraft that were notorious, like, okay, if you get on the APU, which is a little jet engine that gives it electricity to the aircraft before you start the main engines, that it would boot up and something would be wrong, and you would always have issues like trying to get it everything the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
I think anything that flies, especially with the complexity that they have now, that you're going to face issues sometimes with them.
Sure. Did you take anything with you personally that was outside of necessity to personalize the cabin? A picture, any type of memento that you would keep with you? Or
every mission, I had a flag in my flight suit pocket.
Oh, really?
That I flew with. All 3 times I had it. So that stupid flag went on every mission that I went on.
Oh, wow.
I had stuff in my helmet bag that I would send to people or friends, if I wanted to fly a flag on a mission.
Just something that's been with you on it.
Yeah.
Kind of like the space coin.
And we made like a little certificate for the
that's
unit
cool.
that we'd sign and say, "Hey, this flag was flown on a mission in Operation Iraqi Freedom."
That's super cool. The flag that you kept for yourself, where do you have that now?
It is framed on my wall at home.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, so going into the actual missions, the very first combat mission that you flew where you actually engaged enemy troops, did that happen on that deployment?
Yeah.
Do you remember popping your cherry, so to speak, and can you walk us through that?
Well, I remember more vividly the first time I got shot at, which to me was like the most surreal experience I've ever had in my life, because it was at night, and I guarantee you I was shot at during the day, and I just didn't know it, because I just flying over Baghdad, you're gonna get shot at.
Yeah.
But unless it hits the aircraft or you're looking right at the muzzle to be able to see the muzzle flash,
Yeah.
there's no way you know that you're being shot at.
Right.
So I was flying, we were flying convoy security. And for some reason, we'd passed by the convoy, and for some reason, I was up in the front seat. For some reason, I looked back, and I was wearing NVGs, and I saw, like, the rounds coming up. And they were shooting in noise, so it wasn't like that close to us. But I remember thinking, like, I can't believe that guy's shooting at me.
Yeah.
Because it was like I was watching a movie or something.
Right.
And probably the NVGs had helped with the detachment of it, because it's, a mechanical vision, not me actually seeing something like that. So that was just like weird. And then it all kicked in. Like, I talked to my backseater. Yeah, they're shooting at they're shooting at us. And he turns back inbound, and we couldn't actually find the guy, because by the time we got oriented back inbound, he probably ran, because like 9 times out of 10, when they heard the helicopter, they'd start running.
Yeah.
Because how many times you gonna see your buddy get blown to pieces before you
say, I'm not messing with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we put rounds out. I put rounds downrange, but it wasn't like aimed. It was like next to the convoy in an open field, just to so they knew, like, you're not going to shoot at us and get away with it. I may not be, center punching you, but we know you're out there.
Yeah.
The first time I actually shot at somebody, I had the crosshairs on the gun actually failed.
Really?
We were we participated in the second battle of Fallujah, so we would fly from Taji all the way out to Fallujah, and we had gotten done doing whatever it was we were doing out there, because we generally flew around the edges. We weren't flying over the city. We were supporting the Army guys. They were the blocking force.
Mm-hmm.
So they would have us, hey, could you look over here by the riverbank and make sure there's nobody? They were in Abrams, so they had a hard time. They didn't have any dismounts really with them, so we were doing the scouting for them. So we got done with that, and we were headed back. We got a call on the radio that a UAV had found, like, some guys setting up mortars. And they gave us the grid, and we were headed inbound, and we were just going to come screaming in and just drop the hammer. And so I had them I was looking through the sights, and we had them, and I zoomed in, and I had the laser going, and pulled the trigger on the cannon, and it goes pop like that, and
Yeah.
And I don't even think one round came out. Just go, damn it, like that. So the backseater went up rockets and was going to shoot at them with rockets. He actually hit one of them with a rocket, which is pretty incredible considering it's unguided.
Yeah.
All
of them are, or just the?
Yeah, all the rockets.
Yeah.
Well, there are specific rockets now that are guided, but at the time, none of them were guided. So he was shooting an AG warhead, like, hit this dude running.
Wow. One guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you get to observe that as it happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. How far away were you think?
He was probably 500 meters.
Yeah. And just dissipated?
No, actually, it wasn't a direct hit. It wounded him, and he was kind of flopping around, and he was going to shoot him again. I go, man, he's done. Like, don't
waste it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, we nearly hit wires because he was so intent on it's called target fixation.
Yeah.
I go, wires. It's like pulled up. So that was the first time engagement.
During that deployment, I guess two questions. That second Battle of Fallujah was all of the flying that you were doing in support of just kind of recon stuff and not so much engagement? Or did you guys engage targets for the second Battle of Fallujah?
I didn't personally. Some guys did. Some guys in my company ended up like blowing up I guess they were using a little boat over there on the Euphrates to try and like move either ammo or weapons. Like ended up shooting some people I was in C company. Some guys in B company actually ended up shooting for the Marines in the city.
Yeah. Pretty hairy, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the rest of that deployment, were there any air support operations that you went on where that kind of stand out as being, from an engagement standpoint, significant?
Sadr City.
Yeah.
That was always a fun time.
Yeah.
We were supporting 1st Brigade Combat Team, 1st Cav, and at that time they had orders to go into Sadr City and go to the solder bureau and get solder. And so they were moving tanks down, I forget the name of the route, but they were calling us on the radio and they wanted us to shoot rockets over their shoulder into the street to basically clear the way for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one night they wanted us to do a show of force. And I swear to God, like I couldn't find any place to really shoot. There were rounds like it looked like the final scene of Star Wars, you know, when they're flying through the Death Star.
Yeah.
And the rounds flying past us looked like those lasers.
Oh.
But I couldn't find point of origin to shoot, so it didn't hit us. I don't know how we didn't get hit, because it was intense.
Oh.
And I don't know why we're doing this. Those guys are in tanks, and we're in this
metal coffin flying through this.
You know,
Yeah.
The aircraft does have armor plate on it, but not as much as an M1.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, the trail aircraft got hit. We had to go back to Taji, and he took a round through the tail rotor drive shaft. And before we could get back out there, the next team took over. So we were basically done for the night.
So did you end up actually shooting rockets down that alleyway? Or
oh yeah,
yeah.
Down it was a main street.
Yeah.
I don't know that we got any effects. I mean, the ground unit was happy with it, but I didn't. You know, when you zoom in on the target, and we weren't hitting anyone. We're more accurately like putting it into the street.
Yeah. For the rest of that deployment, were there other notable engagements, or was it pretty routine stuff?
I mean, we would respond to troops in contact. That was routine. We were there through the first Iraqi election, so we actually felt like when we left that we had accomplished something, because it seemed like it had started to calm down a bit, and they held elections, and we felt like we had accomplished something. But you know, we come back about a year later, and it was worse.
Yeah. That year in between, was it just kind of a quick turnaround, doing some training, getting ready to go back, or?
Yeah, actually, we left, and to go home, you know, anybody who was a thinking person knew that we're probably coming back. So almost from the time we got back, there was a change of command right when we got back, so we got a new commander. And then there was some people left the unit to go to other units or go, you know, do their thing. So we got replacement pilots, so we had to train those guys up. So the first thing we did We actually trained with SEAL Team 8 out in California. So me and the assistant S3 went to Virginia and met up with those guys and say, this is what we want to do. Because we'd done some stuff with special ops guys in OIF2, not a whole lot. But, we'd covered, like if they were taking out a house or something, we'd done outer security for them. So we're semi-familiar with like what they were asking for. So what we ended up doing was going to the National Training Center in the Mojave, and they would practice HVT takedowns, and we were practicing giving them convoy security to the target house and then doing outer perimeter security for them while they were taking down the objective.
Yeah. You did that for, I assume, a few weeks.
It was a couple of weeks, yeah.
And then you end up going back about a year later total from the time you were there.
Well, actually, there was another training event after that. We went to the joint JRTC in Louisiana.
Oh, okay.
And that was a little more intense. We actually did live fire training there. Some of our new guys got to learn what it's like when you target the wrong people. Because the people at JRTC did a real good job of baiting you into like choosing wrong targets, and it was actually really worthwhile training. I would applaud who was ever in charge in 2006.
What kind of baiting tactics would they use to do that?
They would, because they'd have a notional village set up, and they would drive a van. Because they knew what we were briefed that we were looking for. Because we were briefed, these guys were briefed before they went out, that there was a rocket, a guy that was going to set up rockets that was going to be driving a white van. So the Op4 knew that we were looking for a white van because they obviously collude for training. And so there's a white van, but it's not with a rocket guy, it's with the mayor's wife. So they're driving around and they're looking suspicious, but they haven't done anything that meets the ROE. But when they stopped someplace, one of our guys took that. They interpreted that as meeting ROE and engaged the van notionally. And so the mayor's wife got killed. And so they go through the whole process of the investigation and then bringing charges on this crew.
Yeah. That's sobering, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like a guy right out of flight school.
Yeah.
So he, in my documentary that we made about my unit, we actually interviewed this guy, and he's talking about what an eye-opening experience it was being right out of flight school. And he's like, if my career is going to be like this, I don't think I can.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty intense.
So, it served a purpose, and everybody got to see it. It wasn't just the people that did that training.
Yeah.
Because it was debriefed to everybody. So it was good training, I think.
Yeah. So you find yourself back in Iraq. I am curious, prior to going, did your head shed sit you down and say, here's where we're going, here's who we're supporting, or this is what we're doing, kind of the big mish, so to speak, and what was that?
So we knew we were going back to Baghdad. We were going back to Camp Taji. And 1st Cavalry Division was going to be the headquarters for MND Baghdad again. So we're basically working for 1st Cav. And you basically, I think it was understood that you're going to do whatever the ground unit asks you to do. It's mostly reconnaissance with some direct action stuff.
Yeah. Was it a similar path for you in terms of once you got there that you had to be evaluated, or because you were going with your unit, you got right in and started doing stuff?
Well, what happens when any unit would arrive in theater, they do a battle handover with the guys that were there already. So you do what's called a LAO, local area orientation. So every pilot had to do one, and you'd fly around behind a aircraft that was with the unit that was already there, and they'd talk you through, like, this is where this has been going on, tell you all the hot spots and what to look for and stuff like that. But most of it hadn't really changed that much.
Yeah.
You'd get an intel brief from also coming in, and it was obvious that the insurgent activity had picked up between the time we left, and then there was some contention between the way we wanted to do business and the way the guys that were leaving were doing business.
What was the discrepancy?
Trying to put this nicely. I mean,
There's no need to. not on this show. There is.
I think the command philosophy of the people we were replacing, they wanted to go along, get along, thinking that the being nice was going to get them more in the long run than if you saw some bad guy dropping the hammer.
Yeah.
Because I remember sitting in a brief where the outgoing brigade commander showed us a gun tape, and there were obvious bad guys in a mosque shooting at friendlies, shooting at American troops, and they didn't return fire.
Yeah.
Even though it was within the ROE, because it was in a mosque.
So at that time, ROE wise, you guys were cleared hot to shoot at mosques if you were being fired upon.
You had the right to self-defense. Yeah. And you had the right to defend. If I saw Americans under fire, I had the right to defend them too.
So they were kind of pussyfooting around, so to speak. You guys come in, and was there a general collective agreement that, like, hey, this isn't how we're going to do business?
I think everybody, because I'd say 75% of that unit had been there before. So we were known, my unit was known to be aggressive.
Yeah.
I don't think there needed to be a conversation.
Yeah.
In fact, like some of the first missions we flew, because the outgoing chain of command, there's some overlap there for a while. So when some of our guys went out and engaged aggressively, their commander was not happy. And but we just kind of put up with it till they left.
How long was that overlap?
Probably about a month.
Yeah.
Or two. In
that month, were you still getting after it pretty hard, I guess, mission set wise?
Well, the requirement was that we had to have a team up that's at least two aircraft up, 24 hours a day, 365, weather permitting. And then there were some where we would surge more if there was something going on.
So I guess rotation-wise, what does that pan out for you guys? How many of you were there to accommodate that two up at any given time?
So there's 3 line companies that have aircraft. There's 8 aircraft per company. So we would fly, each company would fly, or each team would fly a 4-hour shift. So that meant in one day, each company had to put up 4 aircraft.
You're flying every 3 days?
Well, most pilots would fly 5 days in a row and then get a day off.
Okay.
I was on battalion staff, so I probably flew 2 to 3 days a week.
Do they break it down where, because you're at a more senior level, that you're being prioritized to certain days or shift covers, if that's the right word to use?
there were, especially if we knew something was going down, they would prioritize who they wanted to fly certain missions.
Kind of a varsity, junior varsity kind of thing.
Yeah, but as far as, and you could tell what time of the day, it didn't take long, if you sat down and analyzed when engagements would occur, what time of day that, if you wanted to get involved with something, what time of the day you needed to fly.
So it wasn't apparent to you guys, or it wasn't, I guess, communicated to you guys, here's our varsity, junior varsity, but you all figured it out after fairly quickly.
Well, I mean, I think every company commander would know, and that was usually a captain in the Army. He knew who he wanted to put on what shift and who you're going to put on the shift where nothing ever happens.
Yeah.
I wish everybody was, at the same level, but we're not. So you kind of hide your weaker pilots where they're probably not going to have to deal with as much.
Right. Do you remember your first real world engagement on that deployment?
Well, the one I remember the most was the shoot down on the 28th of January.
Can you walk us through that?
So our sister battalion responded to a troops in contact call in on a JOF. There was a special forces, I don't know if it was an A-team or just some special forces were working with Iraqi police down in Ana Jaf. And they ran into like 300 plus insurgents. And I wouldn't necessarily characterize them as AQI or some anti-Iraqi government forces. They were more of a religious sect kind of thing. But they got into an engagement with the SF dudes and the Iraqi police. So they called, those guys on the ground called for air support. And our sister battalion sent down 2 Apaches. And I kind of compare what happened to those guys to like an ants at a picnic kind of thing. They spotted like a truck with a 51 on it. So they rolled in on this truck that they're going to take out. And as soon as they rolled in, they started taking fire from almost like 360. There were like a lot more bad guys there than they saw initially. And that aircraft just got blown out of the sky. So their wingman was left by himself, and he got battle damage, and he was kind of dealing with it. And we ended up I got a call. We were in Salman Pak working for ground forces, and that wasn't exactly the most friendly place in Iraq. And they were doing either a cordon or search, or they were chasing down some guy, and they wanted us to help them, and we were down there doing that. And we got a call to go support like this fallen angel. And I'll be honest, at first I was kind of miffed about it, and I was talking to my front seater, and I go, I can't believe they're pulling us off this. We're actually doing something to go cover this crash site, because I'd had to cover a crash site before when Blackhawk got shot down like a couple of weeks ago, a couple of weeks before that. And it was just, we're just doing orbits, covering the crash site. It needed to be done, but it wasn't, like you're covering troops in contact or something. It was a job that needs to be done, but I felt like what we were doing at the moment was probably more important than what I thought was going on down there.
Mm-hmm.
But I was mistaken about what was going down there, because as soon as we broke off and headed that way, they started giving us updates about what's going on. And at first they were like, there's 20 bad guys down there, versus these, they're currently engaged in a firefight. And it took us about 30 minutes to get there. And by the time we got there, there's 300 bad guys. So we're talking, the two aircraft are talking to each other like, okay, how are we going to set up? Because we don't want to go down there and just fly into the same shit that just happened to this guy. So we're looking at the map and we go, okay, we'll set up out to the west because it's late afternoon, the sun's going down. We'll come in out of the sun and engage who's ever in there, because basically the battle's going on north-south, with the good guys to the north and the bad guys to the south. So we'll set off to the west and come in perpendicular, and we'll have the sun behind us, so it's harder for them to see us.
When you say that the one helo was completely shot out of the sky, like both pilots killed immediately kind of thing?
Pretty much, yes. Yeah. They never had, when they finally got to the wreckage, they had a hard time figuring out exactly what shot it down because there were so many bullet holes and stuff in the aircraft.
Obviously, neither of them survived.
No, yeah, they were gone. We pretty much knew they were gone on the way down there.
On the way there, what are you hammering it as fast as the helo?
Oh, yeah, we're going as fast as we can.
Which is how fast?
Depending on the temperature and the altitude and all that stuff. Probably that day we're probably going 120 knots.
Right.
So that's probably about 130 miles an hour. Because we figured, as the numbers started going up, we figured that we were going to be shooting a lot, and we'd already shot a little bit. We'd always test fire to make sure everything was working. We wanted to top everything off, so we stopped at the FARP on the way, so filled up on gas and topped off on ammo. So we got down there, and as soon as we rolled out of the turn, because we established in an orbit out to the west, so as soon as we turned inbound, my front seater goes, oh my God, he's like, oh. And in the D model, there's a way that I can see in the back seat what my front seater is looking at. So there's a video, and I see what he's looking at. And the bad guys are lined up on this berm. There's just like 20 or 30 of them, like lined up. And then down at the corner, further down, there's another bunch of them, and they're all armed, and they're all, so there's like sitting ducks for us. And so we talk it through, there's a JTAC down there. We talk it through to him, like what we're going to do, what we're going to engage with and all this. And me and my wingman, we talk it through how we're going to do this. Pretty much roll in and start shooting. And because the wind was howling that day, and the 30 millimeter round out of an Apache doesn't move nearly as fast as a 30 millimeter out of an A-10. It's a different round. In fact, you look at some Apache video, you can actually see the round moving. It's more like a
45 round.
Well, yeah, and it's more like a grenade launcher sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's moving faster than that, but so the wind can push it around a little bit. So my front seater's first burst was a little bit off, and I remember telling him, hey man, based on my experience, like when you shoot, when the rounds start hitting, they're probably going to scatter. So just pick a guy and like shoot. Like, don't worry about getting all of them. Just, shoot what you can. And when he shot, they didn't move. And I was thinking to myself, that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And found out later in the debrief when they did exploitation of the site that all those guys were taking atropine. They were all wired. So they probably were out of their mind, didn't realize that they were being shot at. But
yeah, I have a note that like a suicide cult almost. Like
yeah.
This group of really hardline religious fighters that were hopped up and out of their minds, and
that was our understanding. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am curious. So in a situation like that, before you start shooting, is there a credence or a tactic to try to get as many as possible for that reason, and that as soon as the first round starts going, they're probably going to scatter. So is it a better strategy to use missiles instead of guns? Or?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because if anybody ever talks to me about my engagements, I always think about the way it could have done it better. And I never think about how it worked out good or how good it was. I think about how I screwed up.
Yeah.
And if I had to do that over again, I would have used flechettes, because we ended up using flechettes later because he got the rounds onto them, but then they scattered and they all jumped in this trench. And when they were in the trench line, that's when I fired the flechettes.
So, you could argue that you corralled them.
Yeah.
And then flechette them, right? It's hard to second guess what they would have done if you'd have done flechettes out of the gate or Hellfires or whatever.
I would like to get them on the first pass.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's why I say I beat myself up. I don't sit around my house like calling myself a dumbass. But if it ever comes up, like I think about it and I go, yeah, I wish I would have done that. But because I don't know if everybody knows how flechettes work, but it's a rocket and it's got like 1,500 little steel darts, and they come out a certain predetermined range, and it's pretty good for like troops in the open like that. That would have been the perfect target, and I just kind of, because we were so fixated on the gun being the weapon of choice for people, because to be honest, like most of our targets, most of the people, most of the things that we shot were like one or two people. Didn't run across large groups like that. So,
is it also safe to say that in the open you're better off using guns typically or flechette than you would a rocket? A rocket would be better for a building.
Yeah, missile. There were some units that would engage with a missile at troops in the open, but it depends on what missile you have on the aircraft, because the warhead, like if I shot a certain warhead, it's not really going to be effective. There were missiles, a Kilo 2 Alpha had a blast frag warhead that probably would have been effective.
If you were to shoot the rocket pods, how fast can those rounds go? Like cyclic rate wise, if that's even how you,
as fast as you can pull the trigger.
Just one at a time.
Well, you can set up how many you want to shoot. We usually shot pairs. So, but if I was on, and there's techniques, and I'm going to save people the boring details of how you set up a rocket shot, but if you're getting the rockets on target, you can just start ripping, just like as fast as you pull the trigger. But with the wind blowing the way it was like, I want to say like 30 knots. And you could see the aircraft tells you how cocked off into the wind it is. So we were basically shooting curveball rockets into the target. So I wasn't real comfortable. Like I shot a pair and saw where they went, and believe it or not, just matched up all the symbology, and it worked the way it was supposed to. The science.
Yeah. Kentucky winded science. Yeah. So you guys initiate with gunfire. That scatters them into a ditch, and then you flechette-round them. Did you wipe all of them out?
Well, after we did that, we got pushed to another target by the JTAC. To be honest, we were engaging at the range we were engaging in. I couldn't tell from the back seat. I don't know what my front seater was looking at. We got pushed to another target closer to the downed aircraft and the SF dudes, because they were getting fire out of this like adobe hut. So they pushed us to that. we engaged that. I didn't ever really see. All we could really see was the hut. We engaged that till we went Winchester, went back to the FARP, got more rounds, came back. It was like later on that night after we got relieved on station. I was out there for 10 hours.
Oh, wow.
We got relieved on station, and the Air Force had a stack. AC-130 came on station, and that basically ended the fight.
Yeah, the AC-130 doesn't fuck around, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I remember we got ambushed right outside of Tikrit and had an AC-130 on within what seemed like seconds. I mean, it was a couple of minutes, but it was really fast. And yeah, I mean, just such an amazing airframe. You mentioned going back to the FARP. Obviously, it depends on how far away that is. But once you land, how fast of a turnaround or how slow of a turnaround? How long does it take to get reloaded?
If I'm just getting rounds, it doesn't take that long.
Like minutes?
Depends on if I was getting 30, it takes a little longer because there's a feeder. So it only feeds at a certain rate. You just can't jam them on there. If you're getting missiles, they just slide it on the rail and it's done. And rockets are pretty quick. So the long pole in the 10's the 30.
Yeah.
I would say 5 minutes.
So if you're...
But if I was getting gas, that's the one that takes the most time.
Like 20, 30 minutes? Or
Probably 15.
When you're Winchester, are you completely dry of everything, or do you leave anything on to make it back?
I want to say we were done with... We had some cannon left. We were done with the flechettes. The thing is, you have different zones in that rocket pod, so we had flare rounds, and I'm not going to shoot those at people. We could have used the HE, but the ones I really wanted to use were the flechettes, and we had, I think, 6. We didn't use any Hellfires, so it was basically we need to go get some more rockets and get some more 30.
So there's times where you're Winchester on what you want to use, and you may still have some armament, but you're hauling ass back to get what you need.
Yeah, it just didn't make any sense to use. And the situation wasn't dire that would cause me to have to use something that was less than ideal.
Yeah. Sometimes that's the case, though,
Yeah.
where it's like just shoot whatever you have and
Right.
get something to put their head down.
Yeah, it was kind of stabilized at that time. And when when we went back to the FARP, there was another team that relieved us on station. So they weren't out there hanging.
Yeah. Okay. So a 10-hour total on station time, and you're firing for a lot of that.
Right.
There was 300 or so insurgents. Do you guys know what the after action, like how many of them you guys ended up smoking?
No idea.
A bunch.
I would assume so.
Yeah.
I was told that the Flechette-Rounds were effective.
Yeah. 2 U.S. forces were killed on that. Were they SF guys or?
It was the pilots.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if any ground guys. I'm pretty sure there were some that were wounded. I don't know if anybody was KIA though.
Yeah. The pilots weren't from your unit?
They were our sister battalion.
How does that impact you guys, like that night going back, once everything's secured and done and the ground forces that you're supporting are back at base? Like, how do you guys move through that night and follow on operations?
That, I hate to say that, but it's not as hard when I didn't really know them. So when you don't really know somebody, it's not as hard as it, because on the 2nd of February, my battalion lost an aircraft, and I knew those guys. And it's a lot harder when that goes down. The mission still has to go on, and that's the tough thing that some people have some issues dealing with, I think.
Sure.
Because we still have responsibilities to other people that are out there. We can't just stop. So,
In In that particular instance, not knowing the guys as well, I guess entire command wise, is there any protocol of any procedure, or is it just the guys right around them deal with it the way any of, whether it's ground forces or pilots or whatever, deal with it kind of the same way, and you just keep going? Or is there any difference between ground forces and pilots that way, like any stand down or hot wash protocol revision or anything like that?
Well, there's like I said previously, I was like one of the tactics guys, so immediately we're trying to figure out how that went down and if there's something that we need to change about the way we do business to keep it from happening again. Um, so there's that goes on immediately. Uh, then there's that whole piece within the chain of command. They got to recover the bodies, and they got to secure their personal effects and all that stuff.
Was there a lesson learned? Like, was it pilot error, or was it just the nature of combat and sometimes shit happens?
That particular thing, it was like unusual. It's a one-off. The only thing I could capture as a lesson learned is maybe because a lot of us had the attitude of I got to get in there. The guys on the ground need me. I've got to get in there right now, and like charging, like a moth to the flame. And maybe the lesson learned that a lot of us took from that was let's establish ourselves a bit away from the action and get more of an idea of what's actually going on the ground before we go charging in there, instead of just going hell bent for leather, like right to the flying over the the gunfight. Because I think most of us had the experience like of flying right over the gunfight and seeing the bad guys like scatter like right away. And it can work like 9 times, but on the 10th time, there's that hardcore dude that's gonna
Hopped up on atropine or whatever.
that's gonna shoot you down or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a bizarre thing that wasn't representative of most of the engagements that we saw. So it's kind of hard to draw too much
Yeah.
from it.
Moving forward to the February incident where it was one from your actual group, can you tell us about that one?
Sure. It was Keith Yoakum and Jason DeFren. They went out. They were launching first thing in the morning to go out on their standard mission. And you know how I said earlier how we would do test fires. So we're trying to make the Iraqis a little more comfortable, not so much scared of us. We kind of designated areas to do a test fire. Then instead of just, I'm going to find an open piece of ground and just launch a couple of rockets and shoot some 30 in there. So they had specific areas that they wanted us to go to. And as we found out with a lot of other shoot downs, probably 70, 85% of the shoot downs in Iraq were about pattern setting. There's always somebody watching. And there was somebody watching that test fire area, and insurgents set up a triangle-shaped ambush around that test fire area. And Keith and Jason got shot up pretty good, but they survived the initial shooting. So they decided after, looking over the warnings in their cockpit that they were going to engage the bad guys. They were going to get the people that did it to them so they wouldn't be able to do it to anybody else. And they radioed the other aircraft in their flight, and they set up an orbit, and they went out to engage, find some bad guys, shoot them. And they went through a couple of orbits shooting, and trail comes off, and they're looking for Keith and Jason. They can't find them. And unbeknownst to Keith and Jason during that whole time, where they got hit in the aircraft was the auxiliary hydraulic fluid reservoir, and it had been leaking and caught fire and essentially melted the tail boom off the aircraft. So when they came off the target on one of those gun runs, the tail boom basically snapped off the aircraft, and they went in, and they died on impact.
Do you know if they managed to get any of the guys that shot them before that happened?
I don't know that there was any evidence that they got them, but you know how they drag off people and stuff like that.
Was the follow-on helo that came in, did they get any vengeance?
I know that they got some people later on, and actually in May, we think we got the people that did it. But yeah, that was kind of hard to deal with.
For you guys, did that change your protocol for doing designated area test gun runs or test fires at that point?
I think we were more circumspect about it, that we would clear that area before we shot better. It actually changed our SOP about if somebody took a round, that the other aircraft would come up and look the aircraft over and make sure everything was okay before we would keep going.
How did that personally impact you moving forward? Was it something you struggled with?
Well, the first thing, because like I said, I was like the tactics guy. You kind of have to do some self-searching and wonder if there was something that I missed, or something that I should have told them, or something like that. And to be honest, we had all been telling the chain of command that we can't be setting patterns, that we felt that there needed to be more test fire areas. And obviously, like right after the shoot down is not a time to go storming in there and tell them like, I told you so, because I think they realized it. And we eventually got more test fire areas that were some of the areas they gave us were actually driven by intel, that they thought they were areas where people were setting up mortars and rockets. So we'd just go in there at random and like fire into there. It's more like a kind of like a free fire.
Yeah. Almost like continuing to try to scare them away from doing that.
Right.
Yeah. At what point in that deployment was the second shoot down? How far into that deployment were you?
So we got there in November, so
6 months in?
Yeah, a little bit less than that, probably.
Outside of those two shoot downs, were there any other from the group that you were with, any other aircraft that were shot down?
Yeah, we got an Apache shot down near Sadr City, and in the summer, it was an Iranian manpad, and these guys were flying over like not fog, but you know how in the city there would always be that smoke layer. So they're flying right over the top of that smoke layer, and the rocket came out of that. And the countermeasure system wasn't able to work in time. And it actually hit part of the rotor system, but it was a dud. So it broke what's called a PC link. It's the thing that changes the pitch on the blades.
Yeah.
So the aircraft started vibrating like crazy, and they basically did a roll-on landing on the ground. And I saw the tape later. It looked like the Dukes of Hazzard. That helicopter is screaming over the ground and like hits this dirt berm and goes flying over one of those irrigation ditches and lands on the other side.
Oh.
And it hit so hard that it like ripped the cannon off the bottom of the aircraft.
Did the pilot survive that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The pilots got out and they did what's called a spur ride. So they hooked themselves into the outside of their wingman onto the aircraft.
Like a spy rig kind of thing?
Well, all our survival vests had our D-ring had like a little lanyard. So you could hook yourself onto a hard point on the aircraft. And it was basically, you sit on the one of the missile rails and put your feet against the side of the aircraft.
So they land, you hard clip into the bird. It's not a suspension line of any kind.
Yeah.
Did they throw some thermites in the crashed aircraft to blow it all up, or?
Actually, some other aircraft arrived on station and they secured the aircraft until we got what's called the DART, which is the Down Aircraft Recovery Team. So those guys got on the ground, prepared the aircraft for sling load, and then later on, probably that evening, they slung it out under a Chinook.
Was it salvageable?
Oh, it was done. But they didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
But they wanted to get it off the battlefield.
This probably seems like a ridiculous question. I'm sure I'll get hammered for it. Is there any type of ejection protocol for an Apache?
No.
Just shit out of luck.
You do an auto rotation.
Yeah. Do you think that ever could be a thing? I mean, is it just impossible in a helicopter because of the main rotor?
Well, I believe there's a Soviet helicopter that actually has an ejection seat.
Yeah.
But an Apache's got two engines. Unless they take out the rotor system, that's probably the only time you really would need an ejection seat.
So there's two engines in an Apache? I mean, are they rated by horsepower, or is it pounds of thrust, or how do you measure the power in those engines?
Oh, they are rated at a certain amount of horsepower, but I couldn't tell you what it is. It's a lot.
Yeah. Thousands?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating. All right, so three total shoot downs during that whole span of the deployment.
Yeah, and then other units, like during that span of time between January and February, there were 5 or 6 shoot downs in the Baghdad area.
Oh wow.
The insurgents, they put forth a concerted effort to shoot down helicopters.
Primarily RPGs?
No, it was primarily crew-served weapons.
Oh, okay. Were a lot of them Iranian man-pad type stuff?
The Iranians were heavily involved in what was going on. Yeah.
Is that something you guys talked about at all at the Chow Hall, or just while on deployment? The fact that there's Iranian forces, technology, equipment, weapons, etc., being used and employed against us, and there's not really much being done about it at a larger scale.
I think there was some folks would. I can't comment on what everybody was talking about, but yeah, the thought crossed my mind, and we would get intel briefs every day before we went flying, so we were well aware of like. So let's say we're going flying today. We'd sit down at the table, and the S2 would come in and say, yesterday X certain unit did a raid on a house, and they found a weapons cache, and in that cache they found this, and inevitably every day it was like there was some Iranian this in there.
Do you think, looking back on it, I know it's easy to armchair quarterback it, but looking back on it, do you think or wish that as a Department of Defense we should have done more about that when it was happening?
I wish they could have done something because of, the explosively formed penetrators that were hurting so many people came from Iran.
I mean, I guess because news-wise, which I know is different than intel brief-wise, but
sure.
There was very little. I mean, there were whisperings of it, but if you take a step back and think, like, if you're the president And obviously he was aware of that.
Sure.
You
I mean, Quid's force went in and down in Bakaba and like killed, I want to say, some Brits.
yeah. I mean, I guess do you feel like we should have done more at a bigger scale, in terms of dealing with Iran for getting involved?
I don't know how you do that without, well, we were at war with everybody anyway, but I don't know how you do that without getting into a shooting war with them.
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion is, me, like, so be it.
Yeah,
The fact is they're taking American lives. That's an act of war anywhere else.
sure.
I wish that we had done way more. I mean, even if it's a phone call, from Bush to whoever, or our SecDef to their, counterpart, and just say, look, take this as your one warning. Like, if we have evidence, if we find any of your equipment, or if there's any smoking gun evidence of you guys taking our soldiers' lives, like, we're going to bomb the loving fuck out of your entire country.
Yeah,
I mean, to me, I don't know why they didn't do that. Because to me, again, like, if you remove the fact that we're at war with one country, okay, well, fine, but that doesn't alleviate responsibility from another state nation
right.
getting involved in it. I don't understand why we didn't do more. Because to me, it's like, if you're going to make the decision to send the amount of warfighting capacity into Iraq that we did, it shouldn't matter. I don't think. Whoever does it, like, well, that's no different than having a bomb, a V bed going through the gate at Bahrain,
Sure.
in peacetime. It's like, well, we're in Bahrain. It's like, so still, if Iran, did a barracks bombing of the Bahraini naval base, like, would we do nothing about that? I don't think we
Right.
would do nothing,
I think when the Iranian stuff really picked up was during the Obama administration.
Yeah.
And I know that there was no way on this planet that he was going to
Yeah.
like lean on him like that.
I guess, even 06, 07, I know it was towards the tail end of Bush. Maybe that's it. Maybe he was just riding his time out. I mean, I don't know. It'd be a question I'd love to ask him. Like, you had to have known.
Well, I know the surge was him because I know that the people in charge didn't want to do it. And I can tell you from the time we got there to the time we left, I'll give it to my commander. He had the S2 put up slides about the significant event chart. Like every day you put up a chart like, hey, there were 14 troops in contact in MNDB. So he put, by the time we were there for over a year, he had them put up 1 year ago and what happened today.
Yeah.
And the amount of activity just went down
Yeah.
like that. It was working.
Yeah. Until Obama took over and shuffled the deck. For the duration of that deployment, two questions. One, are there any other significant, do you call them sorties the same way?
Well, we call them missions.
Were there any other combat missions that stand out as being super memorable, and were there anywhere you knew of directly supporting SEALs specifically?
Yeah, I know about one in particular that you'd probably enjoy hearing about.
I would love to hear it. We would love to hear
it. One of our teams was out supporting a SEAL team that was working in Sadr City. And this was like July of 07. On the way out, and I'm sorry, I don't know the details of what they were doing in Sadr City, but they were working their way back out to a COP where they had staged from, a combat outpost, for those that don't know. They either hit an IED or ran into an ambush, and like a couple of the SEALs got wounded. And they finally made it to the COP, and our guys called for medevac, and medevac was going to be I want to say like 30 minutes till it could get there. And the medic on the ground said that one of them couldn't wait 30 minutes. And our guys took it upon themselves to land in that cop. The front seater of the Apache got out and rode on the outside. And they put that wounded SEAL in the front seat and flew him to the green zone to the hospital.
Wow.
And we were told later that if they hadn't have done it, that guy would have died.
Man, that is amazing.
And for their trouble, our guys got their ass chewed when they got back.
You saved somebody's life, but you're fired.
Yes.
Man, that is ballsy, but man, that is cool as shit. Do you have any idea who the SEAL was?
I never learned that guy's name.
Yeah.
I mean, my next rotation, our next rotation over to Iraq, I did some stuff where I was down at the I was the OIC. We were supporting Siege of Sodef. So every night we had missions where we would support special ops teams that would go out against targets.
Yeah.
So I had to go down to that, down to BIOP to brief those missions. And I remember talking to some guy down there, and I said, "Hey, it might interest you." Told him about that story, and I told him those guys got their ass chewed, and it took a long time to get them an award. You know, because the whole medevac thing, it was an embarrassment. The medevac is why they didn't want to do it.
Seems crazy.
And there were people like, "Well, what would happen if he'd have passed out and because there's controls in that front seat. What if he'd accidentally grabbed those controls?" And it's like, what if,
Yeah.
what if the pilot in the back seat had a stroke? Like what, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand why you would prefer medevac to do these things because you want it trained. But if somebody's telling you this guy is going to pass, if he's going to die if you don't get him to the hospital, I'm not going to sit there and just fly around. I mean, I had a mission myself where I responded to troops in contact, and these guys were pinned down on an island in the middle of the Tigris. And they had wounded, and we'd called for medevac, and we'd stabilized the situation. They weren't taking fire anymore. And they're going, I go, "How are you hanging in there?" Because it was the platoon leader that got shot. And he goes, "I don't know, I'm getting woozy." And I told my front seater, I go, if I don't hear that medevac on the radio in 5 minutes, you're getting on the outside, and we're going to take this guy to the hospital. Well, fortunately, medevac got there. But it's like, I'm not going to sit around and listen to some guy bleed out or whatever when I have a capability. Obviously, I don't have a medic on my helicopter, but I have the capability to get them somewhere where we can get them help.
That's wild. I had no idea that that ever happened. I would have thought that, because I was still on active duty at the time, I would have thought that we would have heard of something that significant.
I think a little bird came in and got the other guy.
Oh, wow. Any other combat missions from that deployment stand out as being particularly more memorable?
I think, well, give me some numbers real quick and tell you, and this might give you an idea why they kind of all like run together. My battalion responded to 800 troops in contact, and we had over 300 direct fire engagements. There was a period of time there where if you and you didn't get into an engagement, it was strange. Yeah.
Were there any other instances where super close call like that, either getting shot down or where the guys were so pinned down that it was kind of a very obvious life-saving mission set that you guys performed to help guys out? I mean,
like danger close.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of them are. I mean, most of them you could argue that you guys showing up are the reason that they were able to get away, but the ones that were like very, very obvious.
Well, there was a, I don't know if you're familiar with the town of Tarmia. There's a town called Tarmia. It's just north of Taji. And it's basically on the edge of our battle space between the unit to the north of us. But it's been a known insurgent hangout for the whole war. I mean, that's where what's the name of the senator that was a Black Hawk pilot?
I'm not sure.
She got her legs blown off, but she was an Army aviator. She got it. It happened right over Tarmia. But anyway, there was a cop up there that was members of the 1st Cav were in this combat outpost. And insurgents drove a V-bed into this cop one morning and were trying to overrun this outpost. And guys from our unit responded. And according to the guys on the ground, if we hadn't shown up when we showed up, they'd be dead. They'd all be dead. Wow. But when they got there, they put themselves between the insurgents and the cop, got their aircraft shot up, flew back to Taji, got another aircraft, got a spare aircraft, jumped in that one, came back out there, got that aircraft shot. One of the guys, his tail rotor, the tail rotor gearbox got hit. And the maintenance guy said later, because he brought it back, if he had flown it 5 more minutes, it would have seized up. But that was just like an absolute huge fight. And according to those guys on the ground, that if we hadn't have been there, that it'd been over for them. But the way the guys, now it upsets the chain of command when you get your aircraft shot to pieces, obviously, because maintenance-wise and it being an asset that's very hard to replace, it's not the preferred method of action.
Generally frowned upon.
Yeah. So the fact that there were a couple of aircraft that were out of action for quite some time for maintenance purposes did not endear those guys to the aviation chain of command.
Right.
And in hindsight, if you look back on it, there's probably tactically, there's probably a way that they may have been able to get the job done without doing what they did. But I don't know. It's hard for me to criticize if you've got guys on the ground saying I'm alive because of you.
Yeah.
But that was a significant event that I think I wasn't there, but it lives in, people I know did it and lives in my memory.
Yeah. Speaking of airframes that get shot up and destroyed, when you deploy with your unit of however many helicopters there are, I'm assuming you bring a few spare. You don't?
There's 24 in a battalion.
Okay. So, if one gets completely shot up, obviously you're backfilling with rotation. Maybe you have to go out more often, et cetera. But do you even have the ability on a deployment to get?
They'll bring in one from the States.
So that is possible.
They'll put it on a C5 or a C17 and bring it over, and then we'll get it. Is
that a matter of days or weeks or?
Yeah, it's not right away. So you kind of operate shorthanded for a little while till you get a replacement aircraft in.
Yeah. Do you have any idea or concept of the cost of the armament, like what each round costs or any of those kinds of things?
Obviously, the cannon rounds are the cheapest.
Yeah.
But I heard one time like a missile's like $10,000 or something like that.
The Hellfire or the?
Yeah.
And you guys are going through just hundreds of them.
Well, probably not as much as the cannon was the primary weapon of choice.
Yeah.
So as far as attack helicopter units go, we were probably frugal in that we were using them.
You guys were the budget busters.
Yeah, because rockets are relatively cheap.
Yeah.
Because they're not guided.
Yeah, I mean, compared to JDAMs,
Yeah.
they're a bargain. Do you know what the actual airframe costs?
I want to say, obviously it's gone up since then. I think it was like one time I heard like 16 million or something.
The subsequent deployment that you did was a very managerial role where you weren't flying the next trip to Iraq.
Oh, I flew. We just didn't fly as much.
Yeah.
And when I said I was the OIC, I was still flying, but I was the person that would talk to the air liaison officer at CJSOTF every day and get the missions. And I would, if I wasn't flying, I would brief the crews on what the mission was. And
op tempo wise, was it quite a bit slower at that point?
we would still have a team up 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
But as far as what was going on, it was slower.
Yeah. I guess,
all that was going on in country was basically Iraqis fighting each other by then.
Yeah.
It was Sunni versus Shia.
And you were just kind of sort of supporting them. Yeah.
Yeah, and we used to call that hot Iraqi on Iraqi action.
It was hot, of course, right? All right, so as, 3 deployments that kind of all mesh together a little bit memory-wise and thinking of it from what's important to get the story out. Are there any other operations that you went on, that stand out as being ones that you want to share for that? But also, I know before we recorded, you mentioned you had a good dog story.
Yeah. In OIF 0608, there was a period of time where the first Cav QRF would stage out of our TOC, and they would wait for intel to develop a target, and they would go hit this target, and they had a dog. So the dog handler, for some reason, she started hanging out in our TOC because we weren't the ones, obviously, and Apache's not carrying them.
Yeah. She probably got tired of being hit on by all the ground forces.
But she'd hang out in our TOC and bring her dog with her. So her dog was named Bango.
Mm.
And that dog was awesome. Like, when he wasn't on mission, when she would bring him in the TOC, and it was almost like you could see the kids that worked in that TOC. It was almost like a switch turned and they were kids again.
Yeah.
Just having that dog in there. And then I flew missions where he's out working and he's on the target. You see that spur missile like fly into the objective. I go, I can't believe that's the same animal.
The Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that some of those dogs have. Some of them are all Mr. Hyde, if that's the more monstrous version. My memory escapes me as to which is which, but plenty of them are that way, where they're not very dual role dichotomy personality that way, but or duality rather. But the ones that do and are that way are very special animals for that reason. I think as Americans, most people either had dogs or had friends that had dogs. They have a very positive association with dogs from their childhood and in an environment. And this is something where I think a lot of people don't think about it or realize it, even if they've been through it, until you kind of frame it this way, is that, in an environment where chaos is the norm and stress is constant and, life and death is a razor thin margin. The psychological heaviness that has and the impacts that has on your psyche are pretty profound. And to be able to have that kind of slice of home, nostalgic childhood, positive association to diffuse some of that is really, really powerful. That I think doesn't get enough credit or credence, and it is a very special thing. It's really cool that that dog had that kind of duality to it.
I mean, you go in there and you see the girl, the radio operators, just loving on that dog.
Yeah, he's digging it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it made me think, kind of what you were getting at there a minute ago. I go, I don't, the Army way back when used to allow units to have mascots.
Yeah.
And I realize everybody doesn't like a dog or everything, but when I saw the effect that he had on those people, it's undeniable.
Yeah. I don't know what kind of person doesn't like a fucking dog, honestly. Yeah, I mean, especially when you see something like that. I mean, I get if you didn't have a dog growing up and the neighbor dog bit the shit out of you as a 7-year-old or something, but those are anomalies, I mean, for most people, I don't know how you can be around a dog. I do think they're not almost. I think there's something has to kind of be wrong with you. I mean, almost from, not to take this like way into the weeds from a psychological standpoint, but almost from the empath, sociopath standpoint. Like if there isn't something about the friendliness and presence of a dog that doesn't give you some kind of good feeling, like to me that probably is reflective of a bigger issue with people, I think. One question I did have in my notes that I wanted to ask, PTSD and stress for aviation, especially ground force support guys like you who are, in the thick of the fighting every bit as much as guys on the ground, and having never been in your shoes, but I can try to project and think there's an element of hanging it out even more, because if you get shot in a vehicle, as long as it doesn't hit you, that's not game over. Like even if it's disabled, fine, you jump in another vehicle in a helicopter, it is fucking game over. I am curious if you noticed in your units and all the guys that you worked with, like the struggles and issues that a lot of our combat veterans have with PTSD. Do you find that it's similar in terms of numbers, percentage, et cetera, to the ground forces, or do you know?
I don't think that it is. And I can't tell you why.
You think it's less?
I think it's less.
Yeah.
I know personally, like I thought about this business ever since I started flying Apaches. And I think it's talked about, what our business is and what you're expected to do. So when you actually do it, it's not, I don't think it's as visceral. I mean, we're obviously closer than some guy in an F-16 dropping a bomb.
Yeah.
And what I see on that screen is a lot more graphic than what they see, but it's not like being across the room putting around in somebody.
Yeah.
That might have something to do with it. But I know that our business, what we are supposed to do, we talk about it all the time. Sometimes I think to excess. That kind of went away after we actually went to war.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of bravado before 9/11, but when you actually had to put rounds down range, like a lot of that stuff went away.
I think that's pretty consistent military wide, where when you start losing guys and you see we're not invincible, we can get punched in the mouth. I think that dissipates pretty fucking quick. Another question I had, in the ugliest moments of war, what kept you tethered to your humanity, or did you just turn that part off?
I think that the way I was raised, I went to church as a child and everything. You got to have that in you. There's people that I would see that I would kind of, the things they would say on the radio or whatever that would make you kind of do a double take and like, what's going through your head, but most of us would I'll give you for instance, like we had a team out flying one day, and they were out in an area looking at a named area of interest in NAI, and they saw some individuals carrying what they thought were weapons. And so they went closer to investigate, and it turned out it was some children carrying toy guns that somebody had given them, and it was near Sadr City.
Probably not the best idea in a combat environment.
Well, somebody obviously wanted us to shoot at these kids. And if I had that tape to share with you, you can hear the humanity in those guys talking on the radio to each other about what was going on. It's like they go from one moment, when they think, okay, I might have somebody to engage, to next they're people who have children of their own, or people that have brothers and sisters that age or whatever. And it's just something I think you have to constantly touch base.
Calibrate almost.
Yeah.
In that tape, did you see a shift not only to where, okay, hey, false alarm, but did they even mention on the radio tape, like, God, who would do that? And
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
And then they're calling the ground unit and say, hey, you need to get somebody out here so these kids don't get killed.
Yeah. Wow. It is interesting, you talk about being raised a certain way, and in different cultures in different parts of the world, particularly or specifically over there, the mental conditioning of savagery that takes place, and that, I think most human beings, minus bad wiring, that makes you a psychopath or whatever, are born pretty innocent, and even empathetic. And in a lot of those societies, to no fault of the kids growing up, but it just gets kind of beaten out of them, and brainwashed out of them, to where there isn't really a value on life. And there's, I also think it's hard to even imagine, growing up the way we did, and even our own children, just to think of like the neighborhoods we live in, having foreign troops taking over houses and shooting people in the street. Like, it's impossible to wrap your mind around what that would be like, and the impacts that would have on a generation of children, or multiple generations of children. But that's the reality of most of the Middle East. They've been dealing with that for generations. I don't know I don't know how you combat that, from a not just defeating it standpoint, but from a, how do you fix that problem to where that's not taking place anymore? I don't know.
Right.
Is that something you guys, or that you personally have thought about or talked about? Or
Well, first of all, you got to get rid of those madrasas.
Yeah.
Because they teach hate.
Yeah.
Uh,
I don't know how you do that without completely invading and completely taking over an entire country, and for decades.
You can't.
Yeah. And to me, that kind of,
And we, rightfully so, we lack the will to do something like that. Like, I don't want the United States to do something like that, but that's what it would take.
yeah. So that kind of brings me into the next part of the discussion of, and we talked a little bit off air prior to sitting down, looking back on, obviously you and I were both in Iraq and not in Afghanistan, but looking at the region as a whole and our involvement, do you look back at the last 25 years as a mistake?
I don't know if the mistake is the right word to use for it, because in some ways it was inevitable. If you look back at Gulf War I and how it ended, and then the ceasefire agreement and how Saddam violated it, and all the things that were going on. And then you have 9/11 and the political environment. There was no way this country was going to let George Bush not do what we did in Iraq. Now, people may want to go back and say, "Oh, it was a lie," or this, that, or other thing, but I don't think it's not a binary yes, no, black, white answer. It's like if Saddam had not kept the inspectors out, would there have been a war? Maybe not. We'll never know, will we? Uh, but the way everything went down, it had to happen.
Yeah, and to that point, I think is worth kind of furthering, which is, post 9/11, you think of the mentality of how I think collectively we all felt like we kind of got, not kind of, like we got caught with our pants down and got embarrassed.
And
Like,
we're never
like,
going to let this happen.
yeah, we're not going to
again.
let that happen again. And so you're going to go on the offense and be very preemptive. And I think that's a big part of it,
I mean, you can go back and say, was it done right? No, it wasn't done right. We could have done a lot of, there were multiple places where we could have made decisions that had different outcomes. I think a lot of people, when they look back on it, people in government are human beings, and that's where I have a problem with some people, and I'm sure they'll let me hear about it. But we're governed by human beings, and they make mistakes. Just because somebody makes a mistake or they make a bad decision, that doesn't mean that they're evil.
Yeah.
And people, like, this is where I go back to the binary. Like, it's like people have no critical thinking skills. They want to go right to the worst possible scenario when the answer is probably the easiest answer, which is somewhere in the middle.
I think the biggest thing I struggle with, particularly in Iraq, is whether or not it was an existential threat to the United States versus him crossing a line inspector-wise or ceasefire agreement-wise, and the blood and treasure that we poured into that country, the close friends of both of us that have been lost because of it. And then taking it a step further and looking at the region as a whole, and that, as bad as Saddam was, there's no denying that his heavy hand and tyrannical nature at least kept Iran out of our hair more than they've been in the last 20 years. That's probably the biggest problem I have is it kind of allowed them.
It destabilized everything.
Yeah, and it allowed them to fill this power vacuum within the entire region, because before they had their hands full enough with him that they weren't able to, if you look at Hamas and Hezbollah, like when did they really blow up specifically in the Palestine region? It was right after we got rid of Saddam, and now they didn't have to worry about him anymore. That's not an accident,
Right.
And so, obviously it's easy to sit here now as a guy who didn't have to make any of those decisions, and I can look back, and say, well, we should have done this, but it's not productive, and it's easy to do.
Well,
that.
I can fully get on board with saying mistakes were made.
Yeah.
The problem I have is with all the people who act like it's this grand conspiracy that people are, it was so Halliburton could make all this money, and I don't buy it, because Halliburton was making a ton of money before they went to.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly understand the easy leap of saying, okay, well, the vice president is in a position where if the United States goes to war, and the company that he has a ton of vested interest in is the primary contract awardee of billions of dollars of contracts, like, it's hard not to at least identify that and say, like,
Here's the problem with that, though. We live in a country that believes in free enterprise,
Yeah.
and we've destroyed, after Vietnam, we destroyed the military's ability to do the things that we hired Halliburton to do.
yeah,
So we have to get some company to do those things.
yeah,
There's only so many, because Halliburton does that for oil companies. You know, provides living facilities, provides food and all that stuff. There's only so many companies that do that sort of thing in the world.
Yeah, to me, the simple fix is if you're the fucking vice president or the secretary of defense, you shouldn't be allowed to have stock options in government contracting.
Totally agree.
Totally agree. Because that would fix that problem.
Totally agree with that. He should have divested himself of all that.
Yeah. At what point did you decide and realize that you were done and you wanted to move on and exit the military?
When we came back from my third deployment, because I was over there 04, 05, 06, 07, 09, and 10. So when I got back after 10, I put in a request to my career manager. I go, look, I need a break. Been on 3 deployments in a row with minimal time back. And if I'm going to keep my sanity, I'm kind of exaggerating here. I wasn't about to go crazy, but I just needed a break. I said, can I go to Fort Rucker and teach? So they cut orders for me to go to Fort Rucker and teach. I was a CW4. I had been passed over for W5. For why, I don't know, but I just wasn't picked up for promotion.
They were still dinging you on the Huey.
Probably. But it was probably because I was downrange. I didn't get a DA photo, and my promotion packet wasn't the way it should have been.
You were focusing on doing the job instead of promoting.
Anyway, I didn't get promoted, which is fine. At that time, W4s could stay to 30 years, didn't need anything beyond that. So the Army changed their policy that I had to go before a retention board, and they canceled my orders to go to Fort Rucker. So at that time, my unit was on deployment orders to go to Afghanistan. And so I call up my branch manager. Well, actually, my branch manager called me to tell me my orders were canceled, and that he thought I would get picked up on the retention board, that there was nothing to worry about. Like, as soon as I got picked up, he would cut my orders again, and I would go to Rucker. Well, unfortunately, the board was going to meet after my unit went to Afghanistan, and once you go on a deployment, you're not coming back till it's done. And the whole point of me wanting to go was because I didn't want to go on another deployment right away. So I just dropped my papers. I just told him, okay, I'm done. I've got 24 years in.
How old were you at this time?
50. And it's like, I said, how many chances am I going to give these bastards to kill me?
Yeah.
So I just put in my paperwork and retired.
Yeah. It seems pretty ridiculous that the military wouldn't say, okay, we'll send you to Fort Rucker then. You know, you're, with the amount of experience you have, you're incredibly valuable as an instructor. Like, why wouldn't they take advantage of that?
Needs of the Army, I guess.
To me, that seems like a pretty significant need.
Well, that kind of goes back to some of my complaints about the way the Army trains, and especially aviation.
Yeah.
The Army aviation is the only aviation branch. You know, like you got the Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, Army. And I'm going to leave the Coast Guard out of this because they don't do tactical type stuff. The Army's the only one that doesn't have a graduate school or some kind of school that you can go to, post flight school, that you can improve yourself tactically, like learn how to employ your aircraft better in combat. The Army's the only one that doesn't. Which tells me, until they do something like that, they're not serious about this business.
What compelled you to write Crazyhorse? Was it wanting to just get the story out of the unit you were with, or?
Well, my ever since I could read, I like reading military history and stuff like that. I've read a lot of books written by guys who flew in Vietnam, Army aircraft,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing what was happening during that deployment made me realize that somebody needs to capture this. Also, seeing what units did when they came back to the States, like all the hard drives are erased, like most of the historical stuff just is gone.
Yeah.
It made me want to keep like as many sworn statements and stuff it was all unclassified stuff that I could keep about like all these actions that these guys did. So actually, when I was downrange during 0608, I thought about writing a book.
Oh, okay.
I did start writing it till I retired, and I had a post-retirement job up here in the DFW area. So I was writing it in my spare time, and it took me maybe 2.5 years to get it written.
Yeah. Is it something that you've distributed to guys that you were over there with, and have they given you feedback on it?
Some of them I let read, especially the sections if I was writing about somebody, if it pertained to them. Like, tell me if this rings true to you. Is this right?
How did they
Yeah,
proceed?
for the most part, I haven't heard anything that I'm full of shit or anything. So.
Yeah. Did any of them give you the, of course you're writing a fucking book just like everybody else, any of that, or they're pretty supportive?
No, because I think most of it is not about me. It's about other people.
Yeah.
I include a bunch of stuff in there that I would call, well, let's step back for a second. When you're talking about writing a book about Iraq, I think there's two different books that could be written. And I don't know how it is in the special ops world, but where I was at, you could write a book that's almost like Catch-22 or MASH, that just talks about all the nonsense that goes on. And then you could write one about all the stuff that goes on downrange that people doing heroic things, putting their lives on the line.
Yeah.
So there's like a duality there. In my book, like I tried to break up the really serious stuff with, okay, here's like a little story about some of the
Funny stuff.
funny or the stupid stuff that went on.
Yeah. I think it's great. And I think it's necessary to inject humor into some of those serious moments, the same way, albeit dark humor for a lot of military folks that find, I think, a release kind of in some of that stress with those moments. But you produced First Attack in the Longest Month. What do you think America needs to know and hear most about those stories?
I would say that, a lot of people don't know just how much people in the military, even today, are willing to do for God and country.
It's something that I think every subsequent generation needs to understand and pick the torch up on. And I think it's stories like Crazyhorse and the two documentaries that that help solidify that. So I appreciate you doing that. I think it's super important. I noticed you brought your hat with you, and you have a Flechette fragment from it. Could you show that to the camera?
Sure.
So
here's the Flechette.
Yeah. So that so how many of those are in a Flechette-Round? Do you know?
I want to say 1,500.
1,500. Man, brutal. Wouldn't want to get hit with them.
No.
Super cool hat for sure. Anything else that you want to mention as we close the door here.
No, I think I'm good.
Well, I can't thank you enough again for, especially again on such short notice, coming and sharing your amazing story. And I want to reiterate just how grateful I know myself and everybody I've ever worked with, how grateful we are that men like you exist and units like yours exist, because a lot of us wouldn't be here if you didn't. And I really can't overstate that. I mean, the amount of times that you guys have saved our ass is endless. You know?
Well, I can tell you, as a senior pilot in that unit, that when we'd get new guys in out of flight school, one of the first things we would pound into these guys that the only reason we exist is to support people like you. And we made sure, I mean, there was no reason for me to fly unless we were out there for you guys.
Yeah. I will say you guys did a hell of a job doing it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. In that same token, I got some swag here.
Oh, cool.
Thank you. The Texas gentleman. Hopefully you can use what's in the black box. Big thanks to John Johnson and Champion Choice Silver. I don't know if you own a pair of shit kickers or if they're all combat boots, but
I do have some Justins.
all right. And then just a challenge coin you gave
Thank
me.
you.
Yeah, you gave me one from your retirement, which is pretty awesome. We'll add to the new coin holder when it comes in next week, and add it to the collection. But man, just such an amazing story. And again, I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
For the listener, I hope you enjoyed the show. I know I sure did. It's an absolute honor to be able to sit down and have an interview like this. And it's so rare that guys like us get to actually sit down and talk and meet. It's usually, sometimes even just 100 yards away or so, but it's rare that we get to interact and kind of recount and relive stories. So it's been a real treat for me. I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.